Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Warehouse Manager. In this week's training, I'm going to show you how to create this incredible warehouse manager, complete with received orders either from a supplier or a warehouse, also including dispatch orders where we're going to be able to send to any customer or even a warehouse. We can also adjust inventory on hand with this automated, fully adjustable inventory management system, and including an incredible dashboard complete with slicers, timelines, and a whole lot more. It's going to be one of the most comprehensive trainings we've ever done, so I cannot wait. Let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining us today. I've got a really fantastic application, a highly requested application, the Warehouse Manager. We're going to work with inventory of all sorts. We're going to show you how to receive orders, right? Receiving orders can be from a supplier or it could be from another warehouse. We'll be able to add drivers automatically, add pictures, trucks, and drivers. We'll be able to assign items to a particular order. We'll also be able to separate locations based on a warehouse, or maybe it's going to be from a supplier. So we're going to be able to do all of that depends on where we want that to go. And we're also going to, of course, be able to save those orders, search for individual orders very easily just by turning that on. And also we are going to be able to have this really cool dashboard. Dispatching orders is another cool thing, very similar to receiving orders, but dispatching orders, of course, we can take an order from any existing warehouse here and then transfer it from here, or maybe we want to transfer it to another warehouse. So we can do that as well. So we've got lots of options on these, and of course assign a driver and a truck. So we have individual trucks we can choose from, anything we want. So there's a lot of choices that we have in this application. On top of that, once we, of course, receive and dispatch orders, we're going to be able to manage that inventory. We're going to be able to adjust the inventory on hand. We'll be able to change the quantity of it as those quantities come in and go, and as we check and count those quantities. We're going to be able to save those adjustments, and of course, we are going to be able to navigate to previously saved adjustments with just a click of a button. So there's a lot we're going to go on to that. I cannot wait to share that with you. We'll be able to add brand new adjustments, automatically add pictures and barcodes onto that. We're going to be able to select a specific warehouse. So if we only want specific items in stock, we want to adjust the items in stock on just one warehouse, we can do that with just a few clicks. And of course, saving that adjustment as well. All right, we also have a lot more in store for you. On top of that, we're going to have a really cool reports dashboard. We're going to be using pivot tables. We're going to be able to use this really cool timeline here. We can adjust the information displayed, drivers by date. We'll also be able to show customers by period based on a specific quarter, or maybe based on all quarters of the entire year, just with a few clicks. So it's going to be really great. And of course, we have sales by location. Depending upon the warehouse, we want to know which warehouse is doing good. We can do just that, or select a few warehouses, and I'm going to show you how to do that with some really cool slices. So I've got a ton in store. I hope you're going to stick with us. It's going to be a comprehensive training, and as they all are, this one as well. So I do want you to grab your beverage of choice, coffee, tea, or whatever you prefer, and we're going to get started right now. Okay, before I do that, I want to let you know of a few really cool things if you do love developing Excel applications, and I want to show you how to do that for passive income. I'm doing that with a comprehensive course called the Mentorship Program. This is an incredible 132-hour course where I take you through all 12 phases of the defining, development, design, and deployment process on how to get your applications out there and get them going through passive income so that you can earn regardless of whether you're sleeping or on vacation. Excel can do that, and along with the mentorship program. So I hope you'll join us for that. I'll include the links down below. Of course, My Excel Mentor will get you there, myexcelmentor.com. That will get you there. All right, thanks so much. Let's get started on this, and I'll go over just a little bit more of an overview of the sheets and components of this application, and then we're going to get right into the design components. We'll go through different functions. We'll go through conditional formatting. We'll be going, of course, through extensive VBA, and along with how to integrate databases and data mapping. So we have a dashboard here, we have our home sheet, and we can get to them linking through just some small macros here, going to each individual sheet. So we've got the dashboard here. Receiving orders, this is a sheet where we're going to be able to receive those orders. Our dispatch orders here, which you saw briefly, we can add notes to that. An order list, now this is how we save our orders, right? Now, whether they're received orders or whether they're dispatch orders, are going to be saved here. All we need to do then is simply separate them by an order type. Everything else is relatively relatively the same. We have the from or to. From could be from a supplier or from a customer, or it could be from a warehouse. And we could also, again, go to a warehouse to a customer. So we can do that with here. So individual, and we have the received location, right? So from location and the received location. From can be, of course, any type of warehouse. From could be a supplier. If you buy parts from a supplier, it's going to come from that supplier. If you want to transfer parts from one warehouse to the other, you can do that with the from. And then the received location, you could receive them into another warehouse, or your customers can receive them. We have individual drivers assigned to any type of order. And then, of course, we have a truck that's assigned to that. And then, of course, we have our pivot data. This is going to help us for our dashboard. We've got several different types of pivot data. We'll be getting into that, and I'll show you the 4 different types. And also, we have order items. These are the individual items for these orders. So we've got an order list. So we got order number 1. And then assigned to order number 1, we have here 5 different individual items with that order number 1. Each one we have, of course, a from. We know it's the from or to type. It's coming from a supplier, so we know that. And that means from location is from a supplier. I'm going to transfer it to the south warehouse. So each individual item can be to a different. So maybe you pick up from a supplier and you want to deliver some supplies to a certain location and another set of supplies to another warehouse. You can do that because in our received orders, right, we can then set where if we buy from an Acme computer and we want 3 of them to go to the south warehouse and we want another few of them to go to the west warehouse, all we need to do is just make those changes and save that order. And we know these items are going to go to the west warehouse while these items are going to go to the south warehouse. So that's going to be really important. So we have these order items as individual. We have a list of warehouse locations. Warehouse locations come with an address, city, state. Relatively simple for our warehouse names and locations. We also, of course, have suppliers. Our suppliers are our vendors, the people we buy our products from. Those are suppliers, sometimes called vendors or companies. And they got a phone number, email, just some basic contact information. Not a whole lot going on with our suppliers. We have our inventory items. Now this is going to come, of course, comprehensive. Our inventory items, there's a lot that can be done with this. We've got item ID, the type, lots of information for inventory items. We'll get into some of this. And of course, I've got some custom fields which might help you here. And inside our admin screen, we've got an admin screen where we're going to be going over a few different items inside that. And then, of course, we have a customers. Customers comes with address, city, state, just some general basic information for customers. I'd like to see what you can do with this template. Of course, you can grow that as well. And drivers, the same thing. We've got drivers here. Drivers include a picture, right? Those pictures are attached to a folder. And inside that folder, we have our driver pictures here. So we've got a set of pictures inside a specific driver. So keep that in mind. That's where they're going to come from. I've got a truck list, right? Truck ID, the name, a truck type, how much tons it is, and then a picture, truck pictures as well. We've got them saved in a folder. So also, if you do want to pick up these particular other resources, including these pictures and icons, that's going to be through our Patreon platform. I'll include the links down below. Just a few dollars a month and you can get all of that and a whole lot more. Inventory Manager, we briefly saw this. This is going to help us adjust items on hand for individual locations. So we can do that if we want to save for the warehouse, right? We can save the adjustments here and it's going to save, and then we'll be able to navigate to those. And of course, if we want a new adjustment, it's going to list all those parts. We can then navigate back to the previously saved adjustment and we can see what we've done here. So there's a lot of features here. So we can navigate to previously saved adjustments just like that. Okay, so saving, we can also print that worksheet. Okay, adjustments, right? This is the individual adjustments. We've made 3 individual adjustments. So those are the individual adjustments. And then the items that we're actually adjusting. Notice inventory item adjustment number 1 has 2 different items. We adjusted the quantities on those. And then 2 has 2, and then 3 has 3. So this is going to enable us to do that. All right, and lastly, I think in the beginning of it, we've got an admin screen. That's the only one I didn't show you. Admin is relatively simple, but there's a lot you can build out with it. We've got a specific folder for our item pictures. Notice we had some pictures on the items, right? Of course, every screen we have the ability to add items. And of course, we got this option. We can show or hide the picture just by selecting that. It's going to allow us to show or hide the pictures. I'll be showing you that. And our pictures are going to come from this direct folder here, item picture. And we can browse for the individual folders using this driver picture and truck picture. I've got all of those located in the folders here, right here. So we've got our driver pictures, our item pictures, and our truck pictures all located here. And I've also got this really cool background. This is actually a background. That's how I get this color here. That background is going to be based on the page layout. If I delete the background, it's going to be gone. It's all white, right? But if I go ahead and add that background in, you're going to find it on that folder. I'll include that as well if you want to see that. That's just going to be this basic blue background that I've got here. And that's going to add that nice blue background. So it's really cool. It gives us a nice look. Custom fields. I've got 10 different custom fields. This is going to help us. We're not going to use this too much, but but it does. I have linked it to the item list so that when you get this, it's a good start for you to customize those fields so your individual items can have custom names, right? I've got some defaults. If we create a brand new receive from, what are we normally receiving it from a supplier, or are we normally receiving it from a warehouse? And I think that's important because when we receive those orders and we do add new order, I want to set this from, right? What is this from? We're going to set it from supplier or warehouse. So that way, if we change this to warehouse and we normally get our supplies from another warehouse, all we need to do is when we go into the receive orders and we click add new order, it's automatically going to change that default to from. And it's very, very similar on the send to. When we generally send materials, send parts, are we sending them to another warehouse, or are we sending them to a customer? Now, if we send them to a warehouse, of course, we're going to have the warehouse drop-down list here. If we decide to send them to a customer, right, to the customer, we want a list of customers to drop-down list. So we're going to show you how to change that dynamic named range there, that data validation here, using that named range. And then we're going to show you how to do that. All right, so we're going to say we want to send them to some default locations there. All right, so that's what's else in the admin. And then the rest is we just have some custom field names. Those custom field names are also located in the item. Those are the last items, and they're just simply linked inside the inventory items here. We have some custom fields starting here in column P, and basically I've just used a formula to grab that particular custom item type. Otherwise, we're just going to show custom field, right? So notice this one says custom field 4. If inside the admin screen, we were then going to change that to something else, and we wanted to, like, the item type, let's say item color, right? Maybe we want that. And then automatically inside that, it's automatically going to be linked. So inside our inventory items are now, column S now shows that item color. So it's simply linked through this formula. So that's a great way to have it done. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off on the home screen. And of course, I've got this home screen here. This kind of ties everything together. And so on every individual screen, I have this home button. It's simply linked to that home sheet, this home sheet there. So it's just a single line macro that's going to let us quickly go to our home screen. And then, so we'll start off on the received orders. So this is a really great, now received orders is very similar to dispatch orders. And as I mentioned to you, what I want to do is I want to be able to add new orders in very quickly. We're receiving orders. We don't know exactly where we're going to receive them. Are we going to receive them from a warehouse or maybe a supplier? So we have those two. Okay, so we've got a supplier here, and it's going to be just a list of suppliers. Let's go over all the named ranges, and that's going to give us a good foundation to move forward on this application. So we've got a bunch of them. So inside the formulas, we're going to go into the name manager. We're going to take a look at all of the name managers, and then I'll kind of refresh your memory as we move along in the training, but at least you give you an idea. We have one for the adjustment ID. Remember, every time we make an adjustment, then we have to secure it with an ID. I also want to know how many were adjusted. So we've got an adjusted item quantity. When we make an adjustment, I'm going to need a named range to adjust, and that's going to help us determine the inventory on hand. I'll be getting that. I'm going to show you how you can automatically calculate the inventory on hand on a per warehouse basis or per location basis using both what was purchased and sent to a location and what was sold from a location, as well as any adjustments that were made to items within that location. Okay, also we have the item adjusted name. What is the name of the item that was adjusted? And also the location. What location was it adjusted in? Criteria, these are automated based when we create advanced filters. And then of course we have a customer ID and a customer name. Those are also using the offset formula. They're always going to be dynamic, and almost always dynamic named ranges, right? That helps us because we want, as our customers increase, so does our formula. Driver ID, the ID of the formula. A driver name, also we have that. And I also want to know the driver picture folder. That's going to be located in the admin. Remember, we've got a named range for a specific cell. That is the folder where our drivers are located. And then if we take a look here, we've got some item data, right? Item data is going to encompass all of the items, right? All of the items, right? So because I have to call it individual columns, so we've got an entire data set there for called a name range for item data. Item ID is specifically for that item ID. Item name is going to be, of course, only for that item name. And then the picture folder, of course, is going to come directly from the admin screen right there on our admin picture folder. So we also, of course, have some information for the native timelines here that we're going to be using. Order ID, going to come directly from the order. Order ID, I need to know once the orders are sold, whether they're, of course, dispatched orders or received orders. I'm going to need to know that from location. Where did it come from inside a named range? And I also want to know the to location, right? So I want to know where it's gone to. So that's going to be important inside a name range. So it's going to be a supplier. Now, where did it come? Was it from or to type? That means, did it come from a supplier or is it going to a customer? From a supplier or to a customer. So that's the only difference we need to know on that from or to there. So now we also have the order items, item name. These are the individual names. Remember, we've got received orders, we've got dispatch orders, and each one contains a name. This entire list contains a name of those. That's very, very important because when we have to count them, we need to know how many were received in this specific location. We're going to count using the name, so that name is very important. Of course, we also need to know how many we're going to be counting, right? When we count, we need to know how many got added to a location or deducted the location. So we're going to need a named range for that quantity. So we've got that also. And I need to know what type of an order it is. That's very important because if it's received, if those parts are received, we know that we want that quantity on hand to increase. However, if it was dispatched to a specific customer, then we know we're going to decrease the materials. However, if it's coming from one warehouse to another, we're going to deduct it from one warehouse and add it to another warehouse. So also we want to know the two locations, order items two locations. We want to know where it's going to. Is it going to a specific warehouse or is it going to a customer, right? It can go to two different places, to a customer or to a warehouse. We've also got some tables that we're going to use in the order items table and the orders. We've got two different tables that we're going to be using. Those are going to help us with the dashboard. So we've created some print areas we'll go over, slicer locations. I've also got a sort by. This sort by is going to we want to be able to sort by. I didn't show you this. We can sort by any type of field, so we can add that. That's going to be here inside the inventory management screen. Also have a supply ID, a supplier ID. We want the ID for individual suppliers as well as the name for individual. Same thing for trucks, truck ID, and also a truck name. And of course, the folder that's associated with those truck pictures, right? All of those truck pictures are going to come in one folder. And I also want to know the warehouse names. I want a list of warehouse names, right? That's going to be used. And I also want to know with all. I need a warehouse names with all. And that's going to mean both all the locations, and that's because inside our inventory management, we may want to see something from all the locations as opposed to one individual location. So we have a named range that's going to include all the warehouses along with the word all locations or words all locations. So we want to get that option too. That's going to come in a named range. All right, that's it for the named ranges. We'll revisit them as we need them, and I'll remind you as we move along inside the training. Here we are on the received orders. Okay, so we're going to be able to just quickly search for an order and then load that. And we want a few things to happen, right? First thing what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have a received date, a received time, a from supplier, and I also want to be able to, now this from supplier, remember, when we receive orders, they might come from a supplier or they might come from another warehouse. When we add a new order, we don't know, we've set the default to warehouse. If this is warehouse, I need to make sure that this is a drop-down list of our warehouse names. If we look in the data validation here, we are going to see that we have yes, we do want to do is merge cells, that we want to see make sure that those warehouse names, that named range that we just went over, we want that to validate there, right? So that's going to be, however, if we change that to that we're picking it up from a specific supplier, we want this text to change, and it's simply the from and then whatever's located in I4, so it's just a formula. And we also want to make sure that this named range, also data validation, changes to all the suppliers. If you take a look now inside the data, and then the data validation, you're going to see that we have now set supplier name. So that's going to happen through VBA. Okay, we'll take a look at that in just a moment after I give you an overview. I also want to be able to select from a list of drivers, and I want to have that picture appear automatically right here. And I also want to picture a list, right? If I check a specific truck, I want that truck to appear as I change that. So we want the picture of that truck. I don't know why you'd be shipping in a tow truck, maybe for shipping cars. So we want to make sure that we have a truck that's associated with the name. So we want those to appear here. If we select a supplier, I want some things to happen. I want that address to automatically locate. If we are going to select a location, a warehouse where we're getting it, I want the address of that warehouse to automate. Okay, so we've got that going on. So we've got a lot of things going on with VBA. If I select a specific item, I want something to happen, right? I want the quantity, I want the item cost, and the total based on the quantity. So if I change that quantity, I want a formula to take care of that. I want to know the supplier, where we're picking it up, right? Maybe we chose a different supplier, right? Maybe this one came from a different supplier. So we want to be able to have an order. So let's say you send your truck out and it's going to pick up material from 3 different suppliers, and you want that supplier, you want it to come to one warehouse, or you want it to go to multiple. You now have that option with this. So we can pick up this one it's going to default, this one will default to whatever's here, but as you move forward, you can then change it. So that way you can pick up parts from all different suppliers and have them delivered all to one location. Of course, you can change the location and have it do. So it's really, really dynamic, this type of an application, because it gives us a lot of flexibility. We can add in notes, and of course, we want a small picture of that item to appear here so we get an idea of what it is. All right, so that's pretty much going on. Once I do, I want to save that screen. I want this fade out message to appear, letting the user know that the order has been saved. I want that order ID to appear here. I want the order total to appear here. It's simply going to be a sum using the total column. All right, so that's it, the basics for the received order. Of course, we delete the order and add a new order. Okay, so that's it's a relatively simple screen, but what I want to do is I want to get into the VBA and show you how this amazing application, this portion of the amazing application works. All right, so that's just what we're going to do right now. So we're going to go into the developers, and you're going to go into Visual Basic. Alt F11 is a shortcut that will get you there, and we're going to go in and we're going to take a look at some of the screen actions. Those are going to be the worksheet change on the individual sheet. So I've got my VBA open, and I'm going to look directly on our received orders. So that's going to be down here called received orders. And what I want to do is I want to focus on the worksheet change. Remember, when I make a change to a worksheet, we want some things to happen. Now, what do we want to happen? Well, the first thing, on change of search order ID. Now, there's a few things. If I put on here, right in E2, and I search for an ID, if there's an ID that's associated with that, then I want that ID to load up, right? Whatever was loaded, those items. If there's not, maybe it was associated with a dispatch order, I want a little notification saying the entered order is a dispatch order, not a received order, right? Because that's a dispatch order. So 3 might be another dispatch order, but 1 order ID 1, of course, is a dispatch order. So we can do that, right? We have an order list here. 1 is received, 2 and 3 and 4, 5 are dispatched, 6 is received, 8 is received. So it gives you an idea of what we're doing. Now, of course, if you're going to go into the dispatch orders and you press in 2, of course, that's going to load because it is a dispatch order. So they look kind of the same, and there's a reason for that. Okay, we want uniformity. All right, so the first change is what happens when we want to do this. On E2, when I make a change, I want to know, is that a correct order? And how do we know that? Well, I've got 2 columns here that's going to help us out determine that. So when I put an ID in here, what I want to do is I want to search and see if there's a row that's associated with that ID. And it's going to be called the search ID here, located in B8. And we're going to place whatever's in E2, we're going to search the order IDs. We're going to add 3 because we want the row that is associated with that, right? That means if I'm looking for the first order, order number 1, what row is it found on? It's found on row 4. That's why we add 3. I want to know the row that's associated. If it is not found, what's going to happen? This is going to be blank, right? This particular is going to be blank because if there's an error, it's going to show blank. So then if it's blank, then I want the user to let the user know, hey, this is an incorrect order. So that's just what we're going to do on here. So when we make the change, that's what's going to happen. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We're making a change to E2. We also want to make sure that E2 is not empty. If those positions are true, what I want to check is B8. Remember, if B8 is empty, it is an incorrect ID, right? If I enter an incorrect ID, I want that message box to come up saying, please enter a correct order ID. And that's just what we're going to have here inside this message box. Please enter, and then exit the sub. Nothing we can do without a correct order ID. If it is correct, what do I want to do? I want to take this order ID, whatever they've entered, and I want to put it directly inside B1. I want that order ID here appear because what I want to do is I want to determine what row it is on, and it's on row 4. I'm going to use the exact same formula, but in a different spot, in a different cell in B2. That exact same formula to determine this, because this is the loaded order. The order that's been loaded is currently order number 1. See here, this is called order number 1. It's linked to B1. Order number 1, what row is associated with order number 1? It's row 4. I also want to know the next available order. If we look in the order list, we see we've got up to 8. I want to know the next one. We're going to use the max formula for that. Max order, if you've seen my videos, you know this by heart by now because we use this all the time, but it's consistent and it's great, and this repetition will help you program a lot faster. So bear with us. There's a lot of new stuff in this if you have not, even if you have seen a lot of my videos. Okay, and we always working to optimize the code too. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the max for that. So that's going to get us the next ID. That's going to be used for add new orders. When I add a new order, I want to place that ID here, and it's going to show that new order here. Again, when we load it, again, as you can see, this order has not been saved, so order row is blank, right? Only on previously saved orders do we actually have an order row. So moving on inside our code. So we're going to then place that order ID that they just entered. You're going to place it in below. Then we're going to run the macro called order load. We're going to get into that macro in just a minute. I want to go over some of the other on screen. We'll go in order. We're going to go over some of the other worksheet changes. Remember, we're going to get to this, the record. That's the macro that's going to actually load all those order details. Okay, now what we saw is we saw another change, right? Remember when I made a change to here from supplier, we saw this drop-down list change from suppliers, right? Drop-down list suppliers to a drop-down list of warehouses, right? So we know this data validation changed. So I'm going to show you exactly how we did it. Of course, it's always triggered on change of I4. So when we have a trigger of change I4 and we want to make sure that I4 is not empty, then what we do. Now, anytime we add validation, the first thing we want to do is always delete the validation. And not only do I want to delete the validation here, I want to delete it here, right? From location. Notice our from location comes from different vendors. If it's from a warehouse, right, I want to make sure that we're doing from a warehouse, right? Notice they're warehouses. But if I change this again to suppliers, we know it changes here, but it's also going to change here, right? We also want to know we're picking it up from suppliers, maybe different suppliers. So keep that in mind. Okay, so continuing on, what we want to do is we want to delete that validation first. So not only in E6, but also in the entire column, we want to delete the validations. We cannot add any validations unless we first delete any existing ones that might exist. Once I have that, I also want to clear any addresses, right? If I've got a vendor or a warehouse here, I don't want to show that supplier. I want to clear it out so the user can add a new one, right? That way it's going to keep this. If it's from supplier, I want to make sure that if I change it to warehouse, I got to clear this out and change this automatically so that I can then force the user to put in a new warehouse. Okay, so clearing that out is going to help there. Also, what I want to do is I want to know if it's a warehouse. If I4 is a warehouse, what am I going to do? I want to add the list of warehouses. I want to add a list of warehouses to here, and I want to add a list of warehouses to here, right? So we can do that with this line of code here. Range E6, H12 through H99. We're going to add the validation, right? We wanted a list type validation. We want alert type stop, and we're going to give it a formula that's going to be based on that named range I showed you called warehouse name. That is the name. Else, what do you mean else? Else, it's not a warehouse, that would be a supplier. A supplier is going to have, let's type that in, right? Supplier is going to have a different one. Now, the supplier is going to be simply, we're going to then add the validation. It's going to be exactly the same, except the formula here is going to be based on the supplier name. That is the validation that we're going to set there. That's all we have to do to update the validation. The most important thing you have to remember is always, regardless, delete any validations that are there already. Then you're able to add any new ones. The next thing I'd like to share with you is we notice that when we're changing the warehouse here, we want that address to automate. Or likewise, when we change the supplier, we want that supplier address. And that's going to be based on the change event located right here in E6. So on change from supplier to warehouse, we want to add the name and address. Okay, add the address. So it's going to be a change event based on E6. And of course, we want to make sure E6 is not empty, right? If it is a warehouse, right? If I4 is a warehouse, then what we want to do is we want to determine the row of the warehouse. Now, the best way to do that, or one way to do that here, is going to be using here. So I've got here a supplier warehouse row here. Inside B6, we're going to set the row. And this is going to be an if statement because we don't know if it is a supplier or the warehouse. It's going to be based on whatever's in I4. We know if I4 is supplier, then we're going to need to determine the supplier row. And that's going to be based on whatever they've entered in E6. The supplier name, we're going to run a match and we're going to add 2 because our first one starts on row 3. So that's going to get us the row of that supplier. However, if I4 is not supplier, then we know it's a warehouse. Then we're simply going to use it to match the warehouse. E6 is going to be based on a match using the warehouse, also adding 2 because the warehouses also start on row 3. And if there's an error, it's not found, it's going to be showing blank. And what that's going to do is it's going to get us the row. So now we know that this supplier row, if it here is on row 4, that means this supplier is on row 4. So if we take a look inside the suppliers and we see along row 4, we see Fredder's fans here, right? I got a lot of Fredder's fans in this video. So we know it's going to be on row 4. And so that's how we simply find it. So now we know the row is, and that's going to be regardless, of course, if it's a supplier or a warehouse. So we can then move on inside the code. We're going to put that into a long variable called WH row, that warehouse row. And that's only if it's a warehouse. And then all I want to do is simply extract the warehouse address from the warehouses B and C and D and E, right? So basically what we're going to be doing inside the warehouse locations, extracting the address from B and then extracting the city, state, zip from C, D, and E. And we could add the country, I guess, if you're global. So I want to take this information and put it on the second row and this on the first row. So that's just what we're going to do here. In that first row, located right here inside E7, we're going to place that address. And then inside E7, also we're going to place that city, street, and just like that. So that's it. That's all we have to do. City, the state, and the zip. There, we're just like that. So I guess probably put the comma in the right place, but that's okay. Don't tell anybody. All right, so continue on. So that's all we're going to be doing. Again, the address based on B, C, D, and E is going to go inside E8. That's all we have to do. Otherwise, if it's a supplier, we're going to do very, very similar. Supplier addresses, in this case, are going to come from here inside F. So the address is going to come from F, and the city, state are going to come from G, H, and I. And we're going to place those in the same cells if it's supplier. E7 will take on the address from column F. E8 will take on, of course, the city, state, and zip in G, H, and I from that table, from the individual supplier table. That's it. So that's how we automate either the warehouse address or the supplier address based on the change event on E6. Okay, what about if we change on receive locations? Now, what I want to do here, this is relatively simple. On this one, right here, this is always going to be the receive location is going to be definitely a warehouse, one of the warehouses. So what I want to do is when that's changed, I want to make sure that we automate the address. And now, of course, we need the row, of course, and that row is located right here inside B7. B7 is a match also based on the warehouse, and that's going to get us the individual row of that warehouse. So all we need to do is make sure that B7, if on change of H6 and B7 does not equal empty, right, we want to make sure that B7 contains an actual value, then we're going to take B7 is going to take on that long variable for the row, and we're simply going to add in the address just like we did before, except this time it's going into A7 and H7 and H8. That's it. That's all we need to do. Okay, great. So next up, what I want to do is I want to show you on driver change. On a driver change, when I change that driver, I want to make sure that we are going to automatically change that picture very, very easily. So we can do that just happen. So that's going to happen on a change event on L4. When we make a change to L4, we want that driver to change. So target, right? And of course, I want to make sure that B4 is not empty. So I want in the B4, of course, is a driver row. This is using a match based on the driver, right? And this is adding 3. Our drivers will start on row 4. Probably try to make it a little bit more consistent. They should all start on row 4. Generally, you want to start on row 4. So our driver is starting on here, so row 4, okay? And then we know that our first driver is going to be on row 4. So we want to make sure that we have that ability to do that inside our drivers. And we want to do that. So that's going to be based on change event. So all we need to do, if there's any change to L4, and we want to make sure that B4, the row that's associated with that particular driver, is not empty, then I'm going to run a macro called received order show driver. We'll be getting into that macro shortly as well, just like the load one. And also the same thing on truck. Truck's located in Q4. However, the row that's associated is located right here inside B5. B5 is going to let us know what row associated for that truck as we change it. So of course, if I change that truck, we see that the row automatically updates located here in B5. We want to make sure that they've entered a proper truck name, and then that row will show. So B5, again, we're going to run a macro. That macro is very similar, and it's going to be that received order show truck picture. Okay, so that's the macro. That's going to be all in our module called received macros. We'll be going over that next as soon as we finish these change events. Okay, so now what I want to do is on item change of details, clear the event, but not unload. And what does that mean? Well, if we take a look at something here, when we let's say if I load an order, I want to make a change, right? We're clearing out all the items and we're adding them again here. That's a change event, right? There's changing. However, there's another type of change. If I add an item here, that's another type of change, right? I need to differentiate between that type of change where the user entered it and the type of change where we load it. So how do I differentiate between those two type of changes? Well, when it's loading, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this B9 to true. So I know that when it's loading, when this information is loading from a previously saved record, I know to mark this as true temporarily. So as long as this is true, B9 is true, we know that we don't want to automate this information, right? I don't want to automatically enter it because it'll be taken care of automatically from here. However, what I want to do, if it's not, then I certainly want to do, if it's false, then we do want to automatically add that in. So we can do that through here. We want to make sure that B9 equals false. Then what we're going to be doing is I want to delete any pictures that are existing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a picture to this row. This picture is going to be called item pick 18. Now, 18 is associated with the row that it's on. So we notice this first one is called item pick 12. 12 is the first row that it's on. So what I want to do is I want to delete it. So that means, right, if I decide I want to change this top one, I need to delete this picture, item pick 12, and I need to add a new one, right? If I change it to a tower case, I want to make sure that it's deleted. So the first thing what we want to do is delete any picture if it exists. We know they're always going to start with the word item picture, and we know it's going to end with whatever row that it's on. So the target row, so this is always going to be this specific shape. I want to delete any item, let's say any item pick. Let's just put that picture, should be picture. Any item picture if it exists. Well, if it doesn't exist, it would create an error. So therefore, we're going to wrap it in on error resume next and on error go to 0. So now what I want to do is I want to make sure that we have a correct item. How do we know that we have it, right? If it's empty or not, right? If it's empty, then simply clicking delete is going to clear all the contents out. So I want to differentiate between those two. So we want to know if it's empty, do one thing. If it's not, do another thing. So if D in the target row does not equal empty, then what do we want to do? Then I want to fill in all the item information right here. So simply it's going to be filling in the quantity, the cost, the total from supplier, default from supplier, and the default received location, which can be changed by the user, along with the picture if this is applicable, right? If it's not applicable and they have decided not to select the pictures, we don't want to add a picture. We only want to add a picture if this is selected. So that's just what we're going to do inside here. So the first thing we want to do is I want to determine what item row is associated with that item name. We're going to use the find to do that. If it's not found, it could create an error, a bug. So what we want to do is wrap that in on error resume next and on error go to 0. So we're going to look for that inside the invoice items sheet. We're looking for the target value, whatever they've entered, and we're going to look for it directly in the item name named range. We're going to use Excel values in Excel whole. We want the row. I want to extract the row out of it, and I want to put it in this variable called item row. But then I want to know if it's been found. We can know if it's been found. If it's the item row is 0, we know it has not been found, and let the user know to select a correct item. Exiting this up, there's nothing we can do if it is incorrect. But if it is correct, then what we want to do is I want to set the default quantity to 1 in column E. And I want to put in the item cost. That's going to come directly from our invoice items. In column K is where that item cost is located. It's going to come directly in F. And what I want to do is I want to put a formula in G, right? The formula is simply the quantity times the cost is going to be the total. So we're going to use G is going to take on a formula. Now, I personally like working with formulas through VBA because I don't like to have unnecessary formulas. I like to clear the contents of all the table, and I like to only have formulas that are going to be used. I don't want to have unused formulas in a worksheet. So I like adding them through VBA, and then we can just clear the contents of everything when we don't need them. So G is going to take on that. It's going to be equals E in the target row and times F and the target row. And what that's going to do is automatically place in the formula right here, so you can see inside column F, E18 times F18, and that's going to automatically, now when the user decides they want to change the quantity, of course that total is going to automatically update because it has a formula. In the next column, column H, what I want to do is I want to put in the default supplier or warehouse, and it's going to be taken directly from E6. So I want whatever's located here inside E6, I want to place it directly inside here in the column from supplier, and I also want to put the location in which it's received. I want to put that directly inside column J. So J is going to take on that default received location warehouse, and it's going to come directly from H6. Now what I want to do is I want to add the item picture, but I only want to add that item picture if the user has decided they want to view those pictures. Now this of course is an option box, and that option box is based on whatever's located in B10. So as I change this, B10 will change from true or to false. B10 is located here. So all I need to do is check to see if B10, if that is true, then I know we're going to be displaying a picture. If they have unselected it and we add an item, we know that we're not going to be displaying the picture for that item. So B10 is going to go from true to false. So we can do that from here. If B10 equals true, we know we want to add, and we want to make sure that N and the item row is not empty. What is this? N and the invoice items, N and the item row. Well, if we take a look inside our invoice items, right, inventory items here, and we look over at column N, what we do is we're going to see a picture, right? This is basically a file name of a picture. These file names match exactly the file names located in my item pictures here. These are the same file names that we're going to be using here. So when we take this file name and then we have this path where they're located, and that path is located in the admin screen right here under item picture. When we combine those along with a backslash, we get a full file path. It is that full file path that will then insert that picture directly in column P exactly where we want it. So we can do that. All we need to do is just to make sure that we have a value, that there there is a picture name in column N. If there is, then what I want to do is I want to check for a proper folder. If for some reason that folder, admin, item picture folder, if it's empty, then just exit the sub, right? We don't have a folder for those pictures, so certainly we can. Now, when you decide I send you this application for free using the links down in the description, of course, you can make sure that you add those folders and add pictures. Now, if you want those pictures, all the pictures that I have, of course, you can get them on Patreon, right? So make sure you join our Patreon. It is a great platform. Don't forget to hit the like button while you're at it, and make sure you click on the subscription and notification icon bell. That'll help us out. Okay, so once we have the picture folder, right, what I want to do is add that picture folder into a variable, and I also want to make sure to add that backslash on, right? That backslash is the separator between the picture name and the folder. So we're going to put that into a string variable. And then what we're going to do is we're going to combine all of that into a picture, adding the picture name from N into a variable, combining both the picture folder and the picture name into one final string called the picture path, pick path. And that's going to be the picture folder along with the picture name. This is our full file path. I just need to make sure that it is accurate, but that is accurate. So then all we need to do is go ahead and insert that. So pictures, I probably should add something right here. If, right, directory, picture path, VB directory equals empty, just to make just like a double check, then right, skip picture, right? We're not going to be skipping that picture if we don't have it, right? Then we'll just call it, we could probably just exit the sub. There's nothing else left in here. Then exit sub, okay? That just is going to be a way out. If for some reason it is not correct, then we can exit the sub. That's an incorrect picture path. Maybe there's an incorrect picture name. But if it is correct, then we continue on with the pictures. We're going to insert the picture based on the picture path. We're going to give it a very specific name. It's going to start with item picture, and then it's going to be based on the target row. This will give us a unique name, but also very specific because they all start with item picture. Once we've inserted it, then we can size it and position it accordingly. And we do that with the following lines of code. We're going to focus on that same picture that we just created, item picture on the target row. First thing we want to do is lock the aspect ratio. That'll make sure that that picture does not get contorted. Then what I want to do is I want to check to see which is bigger, the width or the height, and then adjust that width or height accordingly. If for some reason the width is larger than the height, I want to set the width to the maximum of the column P, right? That picture is going to go on column P, right? So if I certainly don't want it bigger than the width of that. In fact, I want it a little bit smaller. So I'm going to take the width of column P and I'm going to, by 2 pixels, reduce it. And then that is going to be the maximum width of whatever is that picture. So we can do that here. The width is simply equal to the width of the column P minus 2 pixels. However, what if the height is bigger? If the height is bigger, I want to set the maximum of that height to be the maximum of the row. So whatever row you're on, what is the maximum height of that row? I don't want it to go over that. So we can do that here. So the height is simply the range of the current row, the height of that row, minus 2. So this will ensure that either the width and the height stay within that particular cell. Then what we want to do is position it. Now what I like to do is I'd like to center it in column B. Notice that all these pictures are centered in column P. They're not off the left. They're all perfectly centered. So the best way to do that is determine the width of column P, determine the width of this, and then divide that by 2. That's going to put equal spacing on either side. And I'm going to add that additional spacing to wherever the left position of column P is. So the first thing we're going to do is take that left position of column P right here. Then we're going to determine the width of the entire column. We're going to subtract the width of the picture. We're going to divide that by 2, right? That's going to get us equal distance on both sides. So I'm just going to take one of those, one of the differences, divided by 2, and we're going to add it to the left position. That's going to set the middle position centered in column P. But I also want to center, of course, the top position, right? So that top position is going to be centered on that row. We can do the exact same thing. So we're going to take the top position of P and whatever that target row is, and we're going to determine the height of that row. I'm going to take that height of that row, and I'm going to subtract out the height of the picture. I'm going to divide that by 2, and what that's going to do is center it vertically inside the cell. That's it, and that's all we need to do. Else, what is else? That means this here, all the way in this. If here, this particular D in the target row do not equal empty. What if it is empty? If it is empty, then I want to clear the contents. E through O, clearing that row. So if the user decides that they're going to clear it, and I want to make sure to clear the picture too, we're going to clear that out. And that's all we have to do to clear the row. That's it, just clear the contents of the row. Picture gets cleared out automatically. So that is it. So that's all we have to do just to clear the contents out. So continuing on. So now that is all we have to do. There are no selection change events on the sheet. Okay, so that's all the worksheet changes. That's all the changes that the user makes. But now what I want to do is I want to get into the macros. Remember, we have macros that are going to load this picture. We have macros that are going to add new. So we're going to get into those macros, and those are located inside here are received macros. Now we've got a bunch of variables. I'll be going over them as we get through them. Item shape is a shape. That's going to be one of the first ones. The first one I want to get to is how to save that order. Right now, this save order is going to be either for both saved and updating an order. Regardless, it is the same macro that's going to save a new order, or it's going to update an existing order. We can use the same macro. How do we know if it's a new order? Well, we're going to new order. I'm going to use this. B2 is going to tell us, because on a new order, that order row doesn't exist. It's going to be blank. So that is the differentiator. B2 is going to let us know if it is an existing order. B2 is going to tell us because it will not be blank. Okay, so that's how we're going to do. But the first thing what I want to do is I want to make sure that we have some required fields. I want to make sure that there's a date. I want to make sure that we have a from and a to. So we want to make sure that we have some information that is required. So E4, that date, if it's empty, or E6 or H6, that means from or to. Those cannot be empty. If either one of those are empty, we're going to let the user know to make sure to please add in receive data from location and receive location before saving the order. Okay, and the next line of code here is that differentiator, determining whether it is a new order or an existing order. B2 being empty, we know it is a new order. First thing we need to do is get that new order row. You're going to use end XLUp to do that, +1. That's going to get us our first order row based on the orders, right? I want to get that first available order row. That's going to come right here, and 12 is the next available order. That line of code is going to do it for us. Next, what I want to do is I want to take the next order ID. We know the next order ID because we're going to be using it inside the max formula right here. The next order ID is located in B3. I'm going to take that. I'm going to place it directly inside B1, right? So we're going to place that next order ID right there, making sure that we have that next ID. And that's going to come B1 simply equals the B3. I also want to take that order ID, that new order ID, and I want to place it directly inside A in that new column. So that 9 would go right here inside A. That's going to do that for that code. So then also in B, I want to know this won't change regardless if it's a new or an existing order. It's going to be marked as received, right? Since we're on the receive screen, we're only receiving orders on this screen. This is the one that we're focused on, dispatch. They look the same. I want to make sure that it's automatically received. So we can do that inside order list. I'm going to place that received, okay? And so now keep in mind, I probably could have done these with the same screen, received and dispatch. I could have used the same screen along with an option. We've done that before in other trainings, but I wanted to keep them really separate here. I wanted to, that way I have separate names, and I just really wanted to make it less confusing. So I have both received orders, but it is possible to do them on the same screen and just have like a little option button saying receive. We've done that before in other trainings, purchases and sales on the same screen. Okay, so moving on within the code. So next up, what I want to do is mark that received, else if it's an existing order. So all of this is only for new orders. If it's an existing order, we only do one thing. All we're going to be doing is extracting that order row from B2. That's it. Everything else, using data mapping, we are going to simply add to that. So what do we want to do when we're saving it? I want to take all the information here, the date, the time, the supplier, from supplier, the location, the driver, and the truck, and I want to place them all directly inside here. I want to place the date, the time, from to, and receive, driver, and truck all over here. And the best way to do that is to use data mapping. Now we already have these first two columns, right? We've already placed the order ID, and we've already placed the order type. So what I want to do is I want to loop from 3 all the way to 9, and I want to add in all that information. The easiest way to do that with data mapping, I do this almost every single training because it is so fast. It reduces our code tremendously with data mapping. E4, we know E4 is the order date, right? We know it came directly from E4, our order date's here. We know our receive time is right here in G4, and we know our supplier here is in from. So I want to make sure that we add all of that in directly inside our order list here, putting in that time, the from, so it's basically mapped to here. So all I need to do is loop through this, and we do that right here. So simply the orders, the order row and the order column, that value is going to be equal where? We're going to get it from this range right here. That range is in row 1 in whatever column. That range is E4, C4, whatever, and we're going to place that directly inside here. So all we're going to do is extracting that through data mapping, add and update the data. All right, that's it. That's all we need to do for the data. Now we're just going to be focused on those names, items, right? So we know our order items here. Let's put this next to the order list as it should go here. Our order items are right here. We need to save those order items. I need to know if it's an existing item. If it is, update update the information. If it's not, add a brand new one down here. So how do we know if it's an existing one? Well, if we take a look inside the received orders, I'm going to determine that ordered database row here. So if I decide to add a new item, we know, because this is empty, we know that we need to add a brand new item to the database inside this order items list, right? We need to, but if we don't, then we know. So as soon as I decide to save that, right, and update that here, we know a brand new row is going to get associated with this 36, and we look inside the order items and we go down to the bottom, we see that has now been item. It still has the order ID and all that information is uttered. So what I need to do is determine, is it new or is it not? And to look at that, we're going to use column B to do that. Column B will tell us if it is an existing one or not. If it's empty, we know it has not been added to the database yet. But the first thing is I want to loop through all of the rows. I want to know the last possible row. We're going to use column D to determine that. If the last row is less than 12, then go to no items, right? That means there's no items at all. Maybe they just want to save the order for the future. That's okay, but there's nothing to add, so we can skip that. If there are more 12 items, I want to loop through those items. So item row is going to simply equal 12 to the last row. Again, if B, remember we're looking at B, that's our database row. If it's empty, then it is a brand new item database row, order item database row. So we need to assign it. We're going to get the first row using our AND XLF on our order items database. This is going to get us the row. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that row and I'm going to place it directly inside B. The first thing, take that row and place it in B in the item row. Then what I want to do is I want to put that order ID. That will never change. So we're going to only put that in for the new items. I want to put in that order type. I want to know it's received. And this also goes inside the order items, right? So we've got some information. We got to put the order ID, the order type, and that's it. So placing that inside there is very important in the next couple rows. And also what I want to do is two more things inside that. I want to put inside the row that it's associated, and I want to put in the actual row here. So this is the row 12, 13, 14 that is associated with the received order 12, 13, 14. I want to know the row. That way when we load it in, it gets placed right back in the correct row. And I also want to know the database row. As we run our advanced filter, I want to make sure that those rows come with it. So I'm going to add those rows in, and that's going to make sure we do that. Okay, so moving on. So that's only for new items. For an existing item, all we need to do is extract the row from column B. This is the existing database row. So we're extracting that out. Okay, so once we have that, everything else is going to be for both items, right? I'm going to take the from or to type, which is going to be located in I4, right? That is going to be, it's important. We need to know the difference whether it is a from supplier or from warehouse. So I'm going to place whatever's in I4. I'm going to place that directly inside here, inside C. And then D is going to take on the name, the quantity, the amount. So we're just going to bring all the information over directly from here, not data mapping in this case. And see, without data mapping is a bit longer. So we're going to bring in all the item names directly coming inside the database, the from location, the to location, the notes, the driver, and the truck. I want all that information to go inside here so that that whole line item gets populated with all of the order IDs here, all the order information here. Okay, that's great. Of course, that's for both new and existing items. It's going to automatically update in case the user wants to update it. Okay, so that's it. So that's all we need to do again, and that's it. Then we're just going to run a macro that's a fade out message. And this macro, we're going to go over quickly. All we're going to do is run through a loop. We're going to take this shape here. We're going to show it at first, and then we're going to slowly hide it using this delay. And at the end, we're going to hide it completely. And so that means every time I save the order, you can make it faster. Every time I save the order, this little pop-up here is going to show up at the top right, and it's going to fade out just like that. Okay, great. So that's how we save the order, and we got that covered. But how do we add a brand new order, right? When we add a new order, we want some things to happen. First, we want to clear all the information out. I want to clear probably this order ID. I want to make sure that that's clear. I want to make sure a lot gets cleared out. So how are we going to do that? Add that link. This should be linked here. B equals B2. That should be linked. Maybe let's try to clear that out in new order. Nope, that's good. Okay, we just need a link. I want that order ID to show up here based on B on T. Okay, so not sure how that got cleared out. So we want to make sure that everything gets cleared out. And then I want to put in the default time. I want to put in the current time, right? The current date. And I want to put in that default from, right? That default, of course, is based on the warehouse, right? Whatever's located in F9. I want to place that directly in and clearing things out. And we can do that with this one. First of all, I want to make sure that we're also clearing out any item pictures, right? If we have a lot of pictures, right? If I load an existing order and I click new, all these pictures must get deleted, right? So I want to make sure that we're clearing those out. Now we notice that each of these pictures starts with item pick, and then a different row. So we can use that to delete all of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to loop through all the shapes in the sheet. This is defined as a shape. If that shape contains the word item picture, then we're going to delete it. We're going to wrap it in on and resume next. Now what I want to do is I want to delete any driver pic, if any. I want to delete any truck picture if it's there. Okay, so we're deleting those. I also want to set the order load to true and then the order load back to false, right? So the order load, ooh, this should go back to false, right? Oh, it's right here, good. So then what we're going to do is we're going to clear out. Now remember, the reason we do that is because when I delete this, I want to make sure that we don't cause any loops, right? I want to clear this out without causing that loop. So we're setting B9 to true and then false. It's going to prevent loops for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the order load to false, and then after we complete, we're just clearing out all the frills. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set the current date to the current date. We're going to set the current time to the current time using the time function. I want to set the next order ID. B1 is going to take on the next order ID, whatever's located in B3. And I want to take I4 is going to set the default receive from. Remember, it's coming from the admin screen. I4, we have it set up for warehouse. So we add a new one, automatically warehouse is going to go directly. It's going to come directly from right here from F9. Great, so that's it. That's all we have to do to add a new order. Relatively simple. But what about when we want to load an existing order? Remember, we had a change event on E2 when I said as soon as we make a change, we're going to make sure that it's right row, and then we're going to run a macro called load. It is this macro that I discussed right here. Taking a look back where we were just a minute ago, inside the received orders here, right, when I said we make a change all the way up here to E2, we're going to run a macro called receive load order. That is the macro that we're going into right now. So first thing again, what I want to do is I want to remove all of the item pictures. So just like we did before on add new, we're clearing out just in case. Now what I want to do is I also want to delete any truck pictures or drive pictures that go on that. And again, I want to clear the contents out. So we're clearing out, we're getting this ready just to make sure we're getting it all cleared out. But one thing is I don't want to clear out whatever is located here. I want to make sure that B1 is not cleared out because we've loaded that in, right? So we notice that as soon as we add, it's going to be taken into account and it's going to be placed in B1. So we don't want to clear that out because that is going to trigger the proper row. We need that row if we're going to load the data. So what we want to do is we want to set that order row into a variable. Okay, if B2 is empty, right, they won't have a proper row. Let the user know to enter correct order. B2, it's very important. That's the row. Very, very important. So we're going to put that into a variable called order row. And then what we're going to be doing is I want to know if it's been received. If it does not, if B in the order row does not equal receive. Right, this is a receive screen. So if it is not, so let's try, I try to order, here's our order list. Let's say I try to enter order number 2. Order 2 is a dispatched order, right? And if I'm trying to enter that on received, I need a little warning saying, hey, that's not a received order, that's a dispatch order. So how do we know that? Well, that's going to be if we notice we put in 2 here, right? 5, all we're going to do is we're going to check that row. We're going to simply check on that order list right here, and we're going to check to see if it doesn't equal received and B and the row doesn't equal received, then let the user know. Those are only for dispatch orders. If B in the order row does not equal received, then let the user know, exiting the sub out. Okay, if it is, we're going to use reverse data mapping. Basically, this time, all we're going to be doing is we already know what is inside. We already know the row. We're going to loop through columns 3 to 9, taking all this data and adding them into these individual cells on outside our received order screen, just bringing them all in there. So that's going to automatically load up using data mapping very quickly. Great, back in, so we're just running that data mapping, loading all of that data. And now again, we want to load the items, right? So now that I've loaded all the information, I need to load the individual items. We're going to use advanced filter for that, right? I need to know all of the associated items for order ID 1. So we can use an advanced filter for that. So here's our order items here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look through all these items, and I need some specific criteria. Our received criteria is right here. This formula is based on received orders B1, so we know that it's 1. So I'm going to use this criteria here, and then those results are going to come in directly in here. Then we're going to get those results, those received order, and I'm going to bring those directly over inside, right? I know what's row. I know the row that's associated. That's why these rows are so important, 12 through 19. We know exactly what rows to place them in right here, 12 through 19. So that's what we're going to do inside here. So the first we're going to determine the last row, order items. Then if the last row is less than 4, we're exiting the sub out, right? We know to make sure, remember our order items list start on row 4 here. So if it's less than 4, we have no data. So assuming that we have data, we're going to ready to run that advanced filter. I'm going to run it all the way through M, and I'm going to run that criteria from P2 through P3. So here we have A3 through N. Our headers are located on row 3. And we're going to run that criteria from P2 to P3. We also want those results coming in T2 through AF2. We're going to determine the last results row based on column T, right? I need to know the last row of those results. And they're located right here in row, right here. So the last row here is 10. So we're going to bring all the way in here and then bring that information over. So we've got the last row. If that last results row is less than 3, then we have no items or no data. So we're going to check for that right here. If the last results row is less than 3, we're going to exit the sub out. Next one, I want to set that order load to true, right? We're going to order load, and then we're going to set it to false after we're done. So we're going to, this time what we're going to do is we're going to run the results for 3 to the last results row. And we're going to determine the item row is going to be based on column AF. That item row, very, very important, because I need to know what row to place that in inside the item, right? What row is that? Probably should be called order row, but that's okay. Okay, so the order items F and the result row. So I want to extract that item row. What item row is located inside the received items? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place all the data from B through O. Notice that I've skipped a row here from B. This is very, very important. Here we go right here. From B, look, there's a skipped row here. There's a skipped row. Now, how can we do this? We can do this. Why? Because our original data is going to come all the way to N. Very, very important. If you want your results to skip a row, why are we skipping a row? Because look, our results here, I want them to come all the way from B. There's nothing in C. And I want our item names to come in D. So if our results, it's just easier to code. Skipping a row here, then our results here must also skip a row inside the order item, must skip a row. Make sure when you do that, you keep the header blank here, and your original data must also include a blank, right? So we went all the way to column N. Take a look at this inside our advanced filter, went all the way to column N, which is the blank row. Therefore, our results can also have a blank row. Notice there's plenty. Why is there so many? Because we used merged cells inside here. Take a look at this one, all right? This one uses 2 columns. This one here uses 3 different columns, right? So instead, we just use blank columns. And that way we can bring everything over. It's much, much easier, right? So as long as the columns are correct, right? So that's all you have to do. Inside the items, we just keep some blank columns here. And then everything's going to work out. So I'm going to bring all the way from T through AE and bring that directly inside our received items, directly from B all the way over to, which I think we're going to use all the way to here. Okay, so that's what we're going to do all the way from B through O. It's going to equal T through AE. And then what we want to do is I want to add in that formula. Remember, I'm clearing that formula out. So I want to add in that formula located in G, and column G. So we're going to add in that formula here. G is simply equal to E in the item row times F in the item row. That's it. So that's all we have to do for each individual item. Then, of course, what I want to do is I want to run a macro called show or hide pictures, right? So that means if I've decided I'm going to select it, let's just load the existing one again, right? Or we can add new, it's cleared out, and load it, right? I only want these pictures to load if the display item picture is selected, right? If I add a new order, now when I do the same one, notice those are going to load. Those pictures are loading only when it's selected. That's going to be through a separate macro called received order, show or hide item pictures. And that's the macro we're going to go over right now. So basically to do that, what I want to do is I want to remove all of the existing pictures first. The first step is to remove all of the existing pictures, just as we've done before. Then what I want to do, only if B10 equals true, right? Only if this is selected here, this is connected to B10. Only if it's true, only then will we show the pictures. Otherwise, we don't have anything else to do. So if it is equal true, then we're going to check. Then we're also going to exit if there's a missing item picture folder, right? Inside the admin screen, we've got some item pictures, right, located in named range. If there's no pictures inside that folder, that's the one right here called item pictures. That's also the same folder that we have associated inside the admin screen right here. So that's called item picture folder, located directly here in C4. We've given it a named range. And so if that's empty, we're going to exit the sub. Going to determine the last row, right? If I'm going to be adding the pictures for each individual item, I need to know the last row located right here inside column D. And then we're going to loop from 12 to the last, adding those pictures. So what I need to do is I need to determine the row that's associated with inside the items data here. Let's take a look here. Item list all the way over here, inventory items. So what I want to do is I want to determine what row, then I know that picture is located on N inside that row. So that's just what we're going to do right now. So the last row, if the last row is 12, that means there's no data. We can exit the sub out. Put that picture folder inside a variable, and don't forget to add the backslash. That is the folder where our pictures are located. Then we're ready to run our loop. We're going to get that item name, and we're going to put that into a variable. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to search our invoice items database, right? I'm going to search the item names, and I want to look for, using the find, that item name. And I want to determine if it's found. If it is found, I'm going to extract the row and put it into this variable here. Then we're going to run a check. If the item row is 0, we know to go to the next item. It was not found. So it's going to skip all the way down here and go right to here, next item. But if it is found, then what I want to do is I want to put that picture name into a variable called pick name. Then again, pick path, just as we did before, it's going to be simply the picture folder along with the picture name. Then we're going to insert it and we're going to place it. We're going to do exactly the same as we did before. I showed you how to do this, and it's the same as we went over. So this is all we need to do. Exactly, the code's exactly the same as we went over last time. So we don't need to go over it again. Great, so that's all we need to do. Of course, we're going to do that for every single item. Relatively simple. Now, what if I want to delete an order? If I've created an order and I saved an order and I want to delete that order, I can do that very, very simply. If you take a look inside the order list, let's say item number 8, which is a received, and I want to delete that. If I enter that item number 8 and I delete it, I want first the option box, right? So first of all, are you sure you want to delete this order? So the first thing what I want to do is ask the user, are you sure you want to delete this order? Delete order. If the VB is no, then we're going to exit the sub, which is just what I've demonstrated for you. Now keep in mind that if we do delete an order, not only do we need to delete the order, not only do I need to delete order number 11, but I also need to delete all of the items associated with that order. If we take a look inside order number 8 here, that's the one we just did, we notice that there's 3 rows, right? But if I delete, I need to delete these rows. I know it's on row 31, 32, and 33 of our database right here. So it's the last here, 31, 32. But if I delete 31 first, then 32 becomes 31. Then 33 becomes 32. It's very confusing, right? It doesn't really work. However, if I reverse the order, of those results and I sort descending, so the first row is 33, the second row is 32, and the last row is 33, then I'm going to delete row 31 first. I'm going to delete row 32, and then I'm going to delete row 31. So then it's fine, and we don't have any issues with those rows changing. And that's just what we're going to do inside the delete. Okay, so let's go over some of the code. First thing we want to do, if B2 is empty, that means that order hasn't saved. So that's certainly a possibility. If I decide that I want to create a new order, add a new order, and I want to put some information in here, and I want to select it, I just want to, and I have not saved it, there's nothing to do inside the database. If I want to delete that order and click yes, I just want it to clear it out. So we're going to skip that. There's no database to delete, but we want to clear out the screen. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to skip, go to not save, and that's going to skip all of our database and just go to this macro called new, which is going to automatically clear everything out. But if it has been saved, we know B2 would contain a value, that is a row is associated. We're going to get that row into a variable called order row from B2. Then, of course, I want to delete that order from our orders, right? Deleting that row right away. Now we're ready to remove the items. And again, as I mentioned before, we need to run an advanced filter. It should already be run, really, because if we're displaying it, but just in case, I want to determine the last row. If it's less than 5, then it's not saved, then go to not saved, right? That results row. Actually, this should go to, if it's less than 5, last 5, let's just go to exit sub. That's fine, not saved, right? That means there's no data, but it shouldn't happen there. Can change that to 4. So what I want to do is I want to run the advanced filter now, and I want to make sure that A3 through N, again, we're running that exactly the same filter. If it's less than 3, what does this mean, right? Less than 3, that means there's no results at all. There's no items associated with that order. We can go to not saved. However, what if there's just one single item? If there's one single item, what we don't need to do, we certainly don't need to sort it, right? If I have one single row, there's nothing to sort. So I don't need to do any sort if we only have one row. So if our last results row is less than 4, then we can skip sorting, right? So if the last results row is less than 4, then go to single row. Here's our sorting code here. So here's our single row. This is going to skip if our last results, it's going to skip and go to here. Here's the sort. Assuming that there are more than 2 lines, what we want to do is sort them, and I want to sort them based on T3. T3, of course, is that order row here, right? I want to know that order. And I want to sort it descending. So the highest is first, sorting on descending. We're going to sort that entire range from T3 all the way through AF in the last results row. We're going to apply that sort. That it's automatically going to sort them, right? So when I do this and I decide I want to delete them, and I'll show you, we'll stop it at that point, and then we'll run the code and see what that takes to look like. You're going to see it just in reverse. So we go to received orders. Let's go ahead and load in order number 8 again, right? And then we're going to delete the order. This time we'll click on yes, and it's going to stop that code right where we are. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go inside the order items, right? And we're going to see now that they've been reversed, 33, 32, and 31. Now we can continue on and loop through those codes. So inside the code, we're now going to run a results, right, from 3 to last results row. We're going to put that order item row, what's located in T, inside a variable. Then we're simply going to delete that order. And we're going to loop through all of that, and then we're going to go through the next. So that all we do is run that code, clear out that stop. We no longer need it. And then we'll see that if we take a look down here, we see that that order number 8 is no longer located here. There's no order number 8. Inside the order list, there is no longer number 8. And we go into receive orders, and it's in the brand new receive now. So you see it's cleared out. So that's how we delete an order. Relatively simple. Okay, so another thing, now remember, we want to show both the driver pick and the truck pictures. Let's get into the macro. It's going to show us the driver pick, and then another macro to show that truck picture. All right, so let's take a quick look at inside those variables. First thing what I want to do is I want to show that driver picture. Now we know we've got a driver name here. And I also want to make sure that we know the driver row. Now that driver row is essential. That's important because it's located in B4, because that's going to tell. Once I know I've got a driver row, I can then extract that picture. If we take a look inside the driver database right here, we know that that picture is going to be coming from column I, right? If I know the row and I know the column, I can extract that picture name. I also know the folder of those drivers because that's going to be located inside here called driver picture folder. It's a named range located in the admin. Once I put all that together, I've got a full file path of that driver picture. I can then insert it into that. So that's exactly what we're going to do. First of all, it's always going to be called one name. That driver picture is going to be called driver pick. That way I give it a specific name. First thing I want to do is, and any change, remember, this is going to trigger on change event of L4. We went over that inside the received orders. Let's take a look quick back in L4. When there is a change to L4, that is exactly when. Right here is when we're going to run that macro called received order show driver pick, and it's going to be on change of L4 and making sure that B4, that's that row of that driver, remember, very important though, I'll need to know that it is not blank. We're then going to run that macro. So it is that macro that we're going to run. So we want to make sure that we delete, the first thing we want to do is delete any picture that might exist, and if it doesn't, it's going to create an error. Therefore, we've wrapped it in on error, resume next, and on error, go to 0. You're going to run just another double check, although it's probably 2 checks, probably not necessary, but if it is, if B4 is empty, then please select a correct driver. Continuing on. Okay, so the driver row, it's going to be located here inside B4. We're going to set that into a variable, and then what we want to do is I want to then get that folder. I want to make sure that if it is empty, if that folder, that driver picture folder is empty, we're going to exit the sub. If there's no folder, there's no pictures, we don't need to continue on. What we do is we're going to put that into a variable, and of course we're going to add that backslash just as we do, of course, the other pictures. We're going to set that picture name again, and we've got the driver row based on column I inside the driver's database here. In the driver row, this is the driver picture, right? Driver picture name. So once we have the name, once we have the folder, we can then combine them into a full picture path. I can then insert that picture path, but I want to check first that picture path is empty or the picture name is empty. Then we're going to exit the sub. That might be an incorrect path or an incorrect picture name. Once we insert it into the sheet, we're going to give it a specific name called driver picture. I'm then going to lock the aspect ratio. I'm going to set specific maximum heights and maximum width. The width is going to be set maximum to 90. The height is going to be set a maximum to 60. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set that left position. We're going to center that based on column L, based on the width, just as we did before with the other pictures. And we're going to divide that by 2. And what that's going to do is going to center that picture in column L. Notice to column L, that picture is perfectly centered. I also want to center that picture vertically, and it's going to be based directly on rows 5 through 9. I want to set that. And so that's just what we're going to do inside the next row. The top position is going to be centered. We're going to get the height of 5 through 9. We're going to subtract the height of the picture. We're going to divide that by 2. That's going to center it vertically when we add it to the top position of L5. We're going to do exactly the same with truck picture. Of course, this truck picture is going to be located directly inside the row is going to be associated in B5, and that's going to be on a change event just as we did. This time the change event is going to be based on O4. And so what we want to do now is exactly the same, but this time we're going to call it truck row. It's going to come from B5. We're going to check to make sure that we also have a proper truck picture folder also located in the admin. This time we got truck picture folder called truck pick folder. That's the named range we've associated with that. Again, once we do that, we can then associate that file name, that truck picture. We want to get the original name of the truck picture. If we take a look inside the trucks, we see that our picture is going to be coming from column E. Once I have the proper row, I know the picture is going to be coming from column E. So inside the code, that pick name is going to be based on column E. Then we can create both in a picture path, combining both the picture folder and the picture name. We're going to check to make sure it is accurate or not empty. Then we're going to insert a pick called truck picture. We're going to again center that. This time it's going to be centered in column O, and we're going to center the height also between 5 and 9. That's exactly it. Then last up, that's all we need to do to enter both the truck and the employee picture on our received items. That's it. So very, very simple. Simply change it. That's going to delete it and change it again. So if I change it there, it's going to automatically change. Or if I change the driver here, it is automatically going to change as well. Okay, great. That's it. Now we got one more. When I print this order, what I want to do is I want to print it. I want to print it to the default printer, and I want to make sure that, of course, it is printed landscape, right? So I've got that here. My default printer here is Snagit, and I want to make sure that it's also printed there. So you can see that. Let's reduce that a little bit so you can see the full scope of that sheet and see how it plays out really nicely. So although we don't have any items in that one, I probably should have printed it. Let's grab an order, print an actual order, see what that looks like, print that order, and that's going to come into my default printer. Whatever your default printer is, it should be different. Mine is Snagit, which I'm using. And then you see here it's nicely printed. This button shouldn't appear here, right? We don't want buttons to appear here. Let's fix that right now, and that's a good way to show you how to do it. All we need to do is just right click on the group itself, format that picture, right? And then what we want to do is we want to go into the properties here, and we want to make sure inside the properties we do not print the object. Unselect this. Once we do that, that button won't print. So now if we go ahead and click that one more time, we're going to see that when it does print out, that button is no longer visible. And that's exactly what we want. We don't want the buttons to appear here, but the pictures is nice. So perfect. We got our nice received order in a nice printed form. All right, and we don't have the buttons there. Okay, very, very good. So the last thing, how do we get that print? Well, all I need to do is determine the last row to get that range, and then we're going to set that print range. I do want to include this row here. I want to make sure that row 3 is included. And so we do that. We set that up in just a few lines of code. And I'm going to use this print order for both the dispatch and received orders. So therefore, I'm using active sheet. Active sheet, regardless of the sheet you're on. I'm not specifying a sheet as I did here, received orders. This time, I'm going to use this print order for both types. So active sheet, we're going to determine the last row based on column D. We're going to set that page, that print area up. I want to set that print area up. I'm going to first start out with column C. I want that column C to be included, and I also want column P to be included. So I'm going to go all the way from C through P and starting in row 3. And the last row, of course, is dynamic variable based on the last row set. We're going to set that page setup. Orientation is going to be equal to landscape, right? I want it landscape. And then we're going to print it out using this line of code. Just going to set false to a bunch of variables, right? So we can see, let's take a look at some of those variables. So we can see here, all we just need to do is backspace and add in one more comma. We can see all those. Oh, sorry, it's not going to work because of active sheet, right? If I change that, right? Sometimes we want to see that IntelliSense. We want to see what's going on. If I change that, active sheet, it won't work on, but if I change it to an exact sheet, received this one, order. Okay, now let's take a look at that. Now it's going to show up, right? So now we want to put in that, adding that comma in here, receive orders. There we go. Receive orders. Now what we're going to do is now we can see, back it up a little bit, put in that comma. We can see all those from, to, copies, preview, active printer, print file. So we're going to press false on those. Ignore your print areas. Certainly we don't want to ignore those print areas. We just create them. So that's it. So if we can tell since it's not showing up, change it to an actual sheet. We'll change it back to active sheet, and that's going to work just fine. Okay, great. So we've got that. That is it. All right, that's all we have to do. Now we can move a little bit faster, right? So we've covered our received orders. Now our dispatch order is going to be almost the same. I'm just going to go over some of the differentiators in this sheet because there's so many similarities. Again, we're going to be able to search for similarities here, and we're going to search for orders, and we see the similarities. There's one difference here. Dispatch date, right? Dispatch. We're going to send to customer. This one's right. This one's different. If we remember correctly, inside our received orders, Our from is either from the supplier or from a warehouse. However, we're focused on the sending to. When we dispatch an order, we are either sending it to a specific customer or sending it to a warehouse. So this one is going to be our dynamic one, right? To a customer, or when we change this, to a warehouse, right? So we have this based on E4. So now we can do that. So that's the only difference, a little bit difference here. And of course, this is going to be difference here to the warehouse. So there's a few differentiated. When I save that order, here in the order items, of course, we're going to change this to dispatch. That's in saved order. I'm just going to go over a few small differentiates. Otherwise, it is almost the same. So we go into the dispatch orders, right? We want to make a change. So let's take a look inside the dispatch here. If the target, let's take a look right here on change of I4, that's the one I want to focus on for you here, right? We're changing it send to warehouse or send to customer. This is what we're going to change, right? This data validation is either going to be a data validation for your warehouses, or it's going to be a data validation drop-down list for your customers. So change on I4 will be affecting H6, and it's also going to be affecting here, right? So H, our customers are going to be going on here, or it's going to be affected warehouse, also inside here, warehouse. So that is where we're going to be making those changes. So I want to make sure to update you on that based on change I4. Again, this time we're deleting all the validations, but this time we're focused on J. We're clearing the contents out. And this time, if it's a warehouse, we're simply adding the warehouse name as a validation. The only difference is we're going to add if it's a customer, right? If it is not a warehouse, if it's a customer, then what we're going to do is add the customer name data validation. That is it. Again, all we're doing again here, if it's a warehouse, we're simply adding in there. Same change on this, we're just adding a warehouse. And the only difference here is in this case, we're going to get the customer or warehouse row, right? If I enter a customer here, I want that customer row to show up here, that customer row or the warehouse. So if it's at a customer, we're going to match based on the customer name. That is relatively it. So we're going to print the order. Everything's the same. Display items and pictures. Nothing's the same. Just keep in mind that when these get ordered in, the big difference is that these are dispatched, right? And so it's going to be from a warehouse and to a customer. It's been dispatched. Everything else is relatively the same. So we don't need to go over all the same code. All of that code, you're welcome to go over it with me. If you want to see these in printed format, of course, you can get our PDF, our full PDF. I now have amazing PDF code books, and that you can add in with the 200 workbooks. Now come optionally with the PDF code books. Okay, so that's going to be the dispatch macros. Everything's the same. We have a save update, not much difference there. Saved message, same thing. Display orders new, order load, same exact thing, almost exactly the same. Show or hide item pictures, not much difference there, except there's just a slight difference there. So we just created them. So all we need to do, of course, we could have added the same, but I wanted to keep them separate modules. And that way, in case you want to separate them, you could use them separately. So I kept them separate in this place just to keep them. That way you can drag and drop these modules into your own applications. Show or hide driver picture, show or hide truck picture, keeping them separate. Fantastic. So that's it for today. Not much difference. We just wanted to go over the difference here, but that's it for the dispatch orders. So we've covered, of course, received orders and dispatch orders. But what if you want to make changes, right? What if we want to change the inventory? That's a great way to do it. Inventory management, where we can actually adjust on hand. So if I want to know everything that's in the East warehouse, we see the stock in the warehouse, and maybe we want to adjust the actual quantity. Maybe we've counted the fans and we realize there's only 13 fans and not 15 fans. We need to make an adjustment to that. So the best way to do that is with this save adjustment. If I save that adjustment, it's automatically going to be saved. I can then go previous and we can say sign up. So we can load it in. There's no here. So let me go ahead and load new adjustment. There we go. And now we can go previous. We can see that adjustment, see those adjustments in there. All right. So how are we going to do that? Well, the best way to do that is simply adding a new thing, but there's some brand new. Now, if this looks familiar, we did have a training on inventory adjustment, but there's some really cool new features in this. This time we're specifically basing it on a specific location. So that's going to be really helpful. And also we can then sort by a part number. We can sort by category or sales description, or of course we can sort by quantity in stock from smallest to largest, or item name. So we got automatic sort on that. And of course, again, we can display the item pictures or hide the item pictures just as we did before. And of course, we can print this worksheet as well. Simply printing it, it's going to print whatever we have on here. It's going to show up to the last row. So we've got a nice printout. We can either manually put in the information, or of course we can put it in electronically. So some really cool features of this. I really like the ability to adjust items on a per warehouse basis. Very, very important, along with the sort, saving adjustment, and navigating between previous adjustments or navigating between them. So we can look for that. So we can save those adjustments. All right, so how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing what I want to do is understand that we have to filter items based on that. So a new adjustment, I make a new adjustments. I want to do either all locations for all items, or maybe a specific location. So I need to run an advanced filter of all of our items, and I want to base it on the locations. Now we know not only the items, but I want to know all the items that were delivered based on specific locations, right? All the items that came into the location, that's what we're going to be basing it on. So of course, our items are going to be from our received items. So we take a look inside our order items. In fact, I'm going to drag this over here, bring it next to inventory management so they're nice and close together as we work them. So we're working on the order items. So what I want to do is I want to know all these items, the received items, that got associated with a specific, if they were received at one time or another, even if they went out, they came in. And I want to know from a specific warehouse, to a specific warehouse, right? So how are we going to do it? We're going to run an advanced filter, and we're going to know an advanced filter, right? So our adjustment's going to have to take a criteria. I want to know if it's from the East warehouse or to the location. So if I link here, inventory, if it's F4, I want to show any location. If F4, remember, F4 is exactly the specific cell where it's located. So if it's all locations, if I put all locations, I want to show any type of location, right? I want to do it all. So inside the order, I want to make sure to show the asterisk. Otherwise, I want to show whatever is in F4. So as soon as I change it to a specific location, then I want to know. So what I want to do is I want to run advanced filter wherever the from location or to location is. I want to know all the items that are associated. I want those unique items to come down here. I want those results to go in here. Then what I want to do is I want to calculate some stuff. I want to bring in the part number. I'm going to use, of course, an index, right? I want to bring in the part number from our items database, directly from, and I want to bring in the category, the sales description, the cost of the price, and I also want to know the quantity in stock, right? I want to know the quantity, but if the quantity is different, right? Is it all the quantities of all locations, or is it quantities based on one specific location? Well, that we need to know, right? So how are we going to know that? Well, we can use a little bit of a formula. Then what we're going to do is we're going to bring down these formulas automatically as we get the results. We'll know the last row. I'm going to bring down these formulas. These particular formulas are simply index match formulas based on all the item data. So column 4 of that item data is going to be the part number. Column 6 is going to be the item name. Column 8 is going to be the sales description here, and then column 11 here is going to be located here, the cost or price. But our quantity of stock is going to be a little bit different, right? We've got a larger formula here because it's going to be different type of formula. We're going to use sum if. Not only do what I really want to know inside this formula is I want to know all of the order items that came in. So I take a look at the order items, right? I want to know all the order items, right, that were received from a specific supplier, not from another warehouse, received from a specific supplier, right? Here, received actually from anywhere, it doesn't matter where, right? Received to this location. If it's received to this location, then I know it's income. However, I want to subtract out anything that went out of that location, right? So if it was dispatched from a warehouse, it's deducted. If it was received to a location, it is added, right? So basically I need to know everything that received to a specific warehouse minus anything that got dispatched from a specific warehouse, right? So that's basically our formula, and it has to be the right item name. So that is going to be through a formula. So let's take a look inside that formula and see what it's like. It's a rather large formula. However, one caveat, however, if we have listed all locations, right? We want all locations. I want to know all of the materials that were associated with every single location. That's a little bit different, right? So that's going to be different. So we need to have the formula. If it's all locations, do one thing. If it's one location, do one thing. So that's why we're going to break it up into an if-then statement here inside this. Okay, so if the inventory management equals all locations, then we're going to do something. I'm going to use some product, right? Because I want to use some if. This is a really cool formula. We're combining some product and sum if because it's going to be based on any location. The first thing what I want to do is I want to sum all of the order quantities that we're summing the order quantities, and I want to know for a specific item name based in AO3, right? So I only want to know the order quantities based on for this one particular item, right? I also want to know, make sure if the order items are received. Remember, we only want to know order items received for a specific part. And I also want to know order type supplier, right? If they're received from a specific supplier, that means we purchased them. But actually, I'm going to take that out. I want to know any, I don't like that last one. I want to know any, regardless, whether it's a supplier or from another warehouse, that shouldn't be there, right? Everything, right? Everything that came into the warehouse, regardless if it came from another warehouse or it came from a supplier, right? However, I want to subtract anything that went out of that warehouse, anything that went out. And what we're going to do is regardless of the customer. So I'm going to take this out too. That means if it goes to another warehouse, I want to deduct it also, right? Now, keep in mind when it comes to sales, right? If we're detecting, we want to know gross sales, right? In that case, I do want to know what was received, right? If I want to know what our expenses are, only those from a specific supplier we're going to spend money on, and we're going to earn money only those that got sent to a specific customer. So that's a little bit different. Here we're simply counting the inventory on a specific location or any location. In this case, we're focused on any location, okay? So minus, right? So this is basically everything that got received, minus everything that got sent out. So this one's going to be dispatched, right? We want to know, we want to count all the order quantity, order items for this specific order, and I want to know the order type dispatch. Dispatch means left, right? So that's how I know minus everything that got dispatched for this warehouse, right? So that's how we know. So of course, this is all locations. Remember, this part is all locations. So it doesn't matter per warehouse, right? So that's how we're going to subtract, right? So that's all I want to know, all locations. So I want to know everything that came in for this item minus everything that went out, everything that got received minus everything that got dispatched for this item, irregardless of location. Plus, I want to add in, what about adjustments? What if I make an adjustments? I find something inside a warehouse and I decide that we're missing a part or it was broken or we needed to make an adjustment, right? We need to make adjustments. So we also need to add in adjustments. Now, if that adjustment is a negative number, we're going to subtract it. If that adjustment's a positive number, we're going to be adding it. So we're simply adding in, I want to know all the adjusted quantities for that specific item, right? That's it. So I'm going to add in that, okay? That's it. So that's all I need to do. We're going to do the sum product of that. And what that's going to do is automatically add any items for any type of item, right? So we're using sum product for that. So that's it. So that's all we need to do, right, for that. So that's continuing on right here. So this first part of it is everything, all of this right here, starting right here, this highlighted area, this is for everything if it is all locations. Everything else that we're going to focus on here, this part is for specific location, right? Notice, right, when I put the comma here, this is if it's false, right? If I go on the other side of the comma here, you see this is for if it's true, right? Here, move one over, this is if it's true, right? So we can see that this is bold. So here means it is not, it's for a specific product. So now what I want to do is I want to sum all of the products in based on a specific location only. So sum if order quantity, right? We're still summing the order quantity, all the ordered items based on this specific order items, all of the ones to location, right? Anything that got sent to this specific location only, right? So I want to make sure everything that got sent to that location. We're going to subtract everything from the location from that. So again, we're minusing some items, the order quantity, order items, item name, right? Order from location. So everything that left this location, left the location, this way we're going to remove based on F4. So that's based on a very specific. Again, now we also want to add in any adjusted quantities. We're going to be getting into those, how we created those adjusted quantities, but we also want to add in any adjusted quantities. Remember, if that results in a negative number, it will subtract. Adjusted items, name, based on the name, and the location, but I only want to know what was adjusted in that specific location, right? I don't want to know when we adjust things, maybe we're going to adjust it based on a specific location. So I only want to adjust only the, we might have the same part in two different locations, right? But if we make an adjustment, we may make an adjustment on one specific location. So I want to make sure that those adjustments are location specific as well. And it's going to be based on AJ3, which is whatever location is located here, right? right, in AJ3. So that's it. That's exactly how we get the quantities based on whether we are focused on all the locations or a specific location. A very, very important formula, probably the most important formula in this entire training. So I hope you're paying attention, right? And again, that's based on this right here. So it's based on this. So we only want to know the quantities on a per location basis. So it is these quantities here, 13, 20, minus 6, and minus 8, they're going to come directly inside here. So we're going to run that. So we're going to get those locations. We're then going to use VBA. VBA is going to bring down those formulas because we know we don't like to have formulas that are not being used, right? We want to make sure that we only use formulas that are being used. Then what we're going to do is we're going to bring those results. We can bring them all directly inside our inventory management. The first thing we need to do on this macro, when we have new adjustments, we want to clear anything. And we also want to set some barcodes. Now, hopefully I'll remember, I'm going to include a barcode font. If we go into the home, we see we're using free of 9. Hopefully I'll remember. Please remind me if you don't see that. Inside the resources in our Patreon, I'll include this free of 9. Of course, you can get it off Google for free too. I'm using free of 9. All we're simply doing to create this barcode is we're going to add an asterisk before, and then we're going to take this part number right here, located in E, and we're going to convert it to a barcode. So all we need to do is take it and then put an asterisk on either side of it. That's going to create an accurate 3 of 9 barcode that can be scanned. We also want to make sure the picture. So this new adjustment is going to do just that. It's going to be based on all locations or a single location, and we're going to do that with a single macro. So let's take a look inside this macro. We have adjustments. So let's take just a little bit of on-sheet code inside our inventory management sheet here, just a little bit of code. If we make a change to F4, of course, F4 is our warehouse that we're selecting. And also we want to make sure that F4 is not empty. If it is, then we're going to run the macro called inventory adjustment load items. That is the macro that I'm going to go over right now for you. And it's located inside our inventory adjustment module. So it is this first one here, not the first one. Whoa. Load items, inventory adjustment load items, second one. The new one, let's just go over this so we can go in order. The new one, when I click new, right, new here, I want a few things to happen. I want to clear everything out. I want to set this to all locations, and then I want to run it here. So inventory management, I want to clear out all the fields, right? I want to set the default F4 to all locations. I want to remove any existing picture that might exist. So again, we're using the same name, item picture. We're going to remove all those. And then we're going to load this macro here, which is this next load macro. This is going to load the items, okay? I didn't need to use application screen updating false and true again because it might, seems quick enough, but you can add that in, comment out. First, I want to clear all the existing data, B7 through 099. Now, B, of course, is going to take, if it's already been created, right? If I do previous, if it's a previously created one, right? We already saved it. I want the database row to be saved here. Okay, so we want to make sure that. Also, there's a named range. So what we're going to do, I forgot to show you this. This is a named range called, I did show you this originally in the named ranges, but what I want to do is I want to show it to you one more. Name manager, right? All the way at the bottom here, we have warehouse locations with all. And what that we're going to do is we're going to take all of our warehouse locations. This is linked to our warehouse, located warehouse A3, warehouse A4. So we're going to take those names. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have all locations above it. And then I'm going to create a named range called warehouse all locations. It is this named range that we're going to do here. So that way, if we make any changes to our existing locations, they automatically get linked in. Okay, so that's how we have to do, include all locations. And it's located right here. All right, so back inside the code we go. And what I want to show you now is once we've made it, I want to set that sort column, whatever's in B2. Remember, we can sort it by different, right? If I want to set a category, I can sort it based on category. They're all the same category, part number, or what have you and whatnot, okay? But I want to set the sort column, right? Now, this is very important, right? When I run this advanced filter and I create those order items, I need to know what we're sorting by, right? How are we going to sort it, right? So here's our data that we're going to need to sort. I want to sort it before it comes in here, right? But if I want to know, how do I know what column to sort, right? So if I take a look at this column, we see that this is column 41, column 41. So what if I run a match? I create a named range for all of our headers here. I've done that right here. So probably right here, I've created a name range called sort by right here. It is that same named range that I'm using inside the data validation here called sort by. So I'm going to run a match, right? If it's 1, right? Let's say I select item 1 is the first one, right? But how do I know that I'm going to be sorting? Let's go back into the order items. How do I know I'm going to be sorting column 41? This is column 42. I need to know what column to sort by. Well, if I know our item name matched is 1, and this is 2, and this is 3, all I need to do is simply add 40 to it, and then we know we've got, because we know this is column 41. So if I add 40 to a match result, and that's just what I did inside here. So we're going to match I4 based on the sort by. This will, right now, it'll return 1. So if I add 40 to that, it's going to get us our column. When I run that sort, I'm going to know exactly what column to sort by. And I'll show you how that's inside the code. So we want to put that into a variable called sort column. Okay. Now we're really going to focus on our order items. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that we clear out any previous results. So inside the order items, I'm going to take all the way from A03 all the way to AT and just go all the way down, just clear out any results. I really don't like to have formulas sticking around in the worksheet if they're not being used. Keeping your workbook light and fast is what we want to do here. So we're going to clear out those. We do that with this line of code, AO through A3. Keep in mind that when you do clear content selects, always save your work before you run the code, because if you get this wrong or this range wrong, you're going to erase all your data or all of your format's going to be a real pain. Anytime you use clear contents, be very careful, save your work, and then run the code. And then if things go wrong, you can close it without saving. Okay, the last row, we're going to determine the last row. Again, if it's less than 4, go to no data. Running our advanced filter, you know how this works now. A2 through AK4, remember I want 2 rows, right? We're going to be focused on 2 different columns, and we want the from location or the to location. So we're going to keep that in here. Either one is going to work. So AJ2 through AK4, that's going to be our criteria. We're going to have those come in here, and all we're going to be returning in this case is the item name. That's all I want. Everything else will come in through formulas and have those results. So AO2 is where our result's going to come, right? We're going to determine the last result, AO. If it's less than 3, we know there's no data, so we can skip all of this. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to bring down the formulas. I know the last row, and I can do that with one line of code. Our formulas stay up here all the time, right? They don't get removed. Then our formulas just simply take whatever's located in row 2 here, all the way from AP through AT, and bring down those formulas here. Now keep in mind, when you do run formulas, we want that formula to be associated with the first row, whatever the first row of data is here. That way, when I bring them down, we're not using copy and paste, right? Because that involves more than one line of code. I think it's a little bit slower too. I like to do a straight formula to formula thing. So that's very easy to do. And if you want to make your workbook really fast, what you want to do inside the code is you can copy and paste the data, right? Notice, let's say we have a lot of data, right? Maybe you have tons of data and your work's getting slow. Take these formulas out, copy them using VBA, paste in the values, or just do a value to value, right? Now we've got the important information, right? But I have no more formulas, right? We've got all, and we don't need the formulas, we need the values, right? Remember, or not with your original formulas, keep the original formulas there, but simply copy and paste that value down. Now you can use copy and paste, or you can use value to value. I can use range AP3 through AT in the last results row equals range AP3 and AT in the last results row. That in itself will remove the formulas. If you've got a lot of data and you want to make things faster, that will go. That way you'll have only the data, which is important, and not the formulas. The formulas are already calculated. Make sure that you do, maybe you want to calculate the sheet. Once you bring them down, force the calculation. That can help, and then clear it out. Okay, just a little tidbit there. So what we want to do now is I want to sort the data. Once I've brought them down using this line of code, formula to formula, very, very easy, not even using copy and paste. Then what I want to do is I want to sort. Now remember, we mentioned that sort key is very, very important. I want to know what column we're sorting, 41, 42, 43, right? So that, of course, is in a variable called our sort column that we've already placed up here, sort column. So now we're ready to complete the sort. So with the sort, we're going to clear any sorts. We're going to add a key. Now don't forget to also call out the sheet again. We're using cells, not range, because both our row and our column are dynamic here in variables. Our sort column is here. Sorting on, I'm going to sort ascending, right? And that's very easy. And just set the range. Again, calling out that sheet one more time. AO3 to 18, the last results row. That's going to apply that sort. Automatically going to sort the data. Then all we need to do is bring over the data. Very, very simple here. So now I'm going to take this data and simply bring it into our inventory management right here, all the way from D through I, okay? So we can do that with this line of code, D7 through I, last results row, equals D and AO3 to 18, the last results. Just going to bring over all of our data from our orders, okay? That's it. Okay, so now all we want to do is simply add in both the formulas and the pictures. Now, again, what I do, now you can keep formulas. I don't like to keep formulas in here. Notice it's a formula, but I only like to keep the formulas in where the data is. So what if I take this formula and I store it somewhere else, like up here, okay? Now I've stored this formula up here. This is for the barcode. And I have another formula for the value adjustment. That's located right here. So I've got one in J5 and I've got one in M5. So if I just copy the formulas and bring them down here, then our value adjustment, because when I adjust that quantity, I want to make sure that the formula knows that that formula is simply if L7 equals empty, then show empty. Otherwise, it is going to be L7, the adjusted, the difference times the cost, and that's going to get us. So when I adjust from 13 down to 10, and we know our individual cost is 25 per item, we've adjusted 3, we've reduced it to, our cost is going to be a deduction of 75. However, if we increase it to 15, our addition is going to be an increase of 50. So we just want that information here and that value adjustment. So again, I don't like to have those formulas. We can clear everything out very easily. We don't have to worry about those formulas because as soon as I run that macro again, they're automatically going to get added and they're automatically back here again. So what I want to do is keep those formulas up here, and then after we've loaded the data, then bring in the formula, one for the barcode and one for the value adjustment. But we can do it in a single line of code. Simply just bring in J5 all the way to M5. And we do that right here, J7 through M in the last results row equals J5 through M5. Bring in those formulas down. Now all we want to do is run a macro called inventory adjustment, show and hide the pictures. Now this is very similar, so we don't really need to go over that. All I'm going to do here, because we're simply, again, we're going to we don't need that search. We're going to take the name, determine the row, and then what we're going to do is we're going to look in the inventory items here, N and the O. We're going to create that based on that folder, create the picture, and then center that picture because it's exactly the center of that picture located right here. This time we're going to be based on column K, centering that picture, basing its size again. And that's all we do in this. So it's but just don't forget to remove, when you're adding pictures, don't forget to remove them all first. Then we're going to loop through that. We're simply going to grab our item picture folder, right? Exit on missing folder, looping through all of them here. But before we loop, getting our picture folder and putting it in a variable, looping it, getting the item, the item name from D. We're going to make sure we find it using find item row, getting the picture name once it's found from column N, inserting the picture path, centering it in column K. That's all we do here. It's almost the same as we are, so I don't think we need to go over it in detail. Exactly the same. All right, so what about when we want to save it? Now I want to save it, again, just like we did before. When we want to save an adjustment, I want to save what warehouse, I want to save the total amount, and I want to save the date and just a little bit of information, adjustment ID, the date, and the amount. That's all I want to save there. But I do want to save the individual items. When I know that we've made adjustments to 2 different items, I want to save that information, and I want to save it in the inventory adjustments. So it's going to be saved in this one. I want to know the ID that it was saved, the date. I want to know the item name. I want to know the quantity, the adjusted quantity, how many bits the adjusted, the location, if any, and I also want to know the row that's associated, right? So that's all we need to do inside here. So I want to know the row, that database row, right here. That way, if we make an update, we can know what row to save it on. So that's just what we're going to do in here. So if I decide I'm going to save this adjustment here, I want, of course, a fade out message to come up, and I want that information to be saved. So we take a look, we see that we have one more here, 290 here, this 4 here, and we also have our new items here located here, 444. You know what? I think we got that max is not working. Notice it gave the same ID. Don't think that worked. I'm going to double check that. So because I think we got an issue with that. Notice it. So let's do a new one. And we'll add a new adjustment. So I want to check that max. I think we have a max. Next invoice, next ID, that looks correct. Max using the adjustment. And then there's some issue with that. I better take a double look at that. Adjusting the actual quantity. Setting, let's set a specific location here, making sure that we have that correct, right? Actual quantity, let's say we've got 4 here, and let's say we got 24 here. So we're going to increase of 740. We're going to save that adjustment. Adjustment save, right? 2 different items. Adjustment now, see, didn't save it there. All right, I know the problem. We want to make sure anytime we go new adjustment, right? New adjustment is very important. We want to make sure the adjustment ID is closed out, right? If I go previous adjustment, and I want to make sure that we always clear out. We got to know the row. If the row is blank, then it's going to be saved. So let's take a look at that, making sure that we clear out the row, right? So I'll double check that. So now what we see is, let's take a look inside here, loading that, right? We want to make sure that that's already cleared out. Adding an ID here, updating that, saving that, making sure that it is cleared out. Now we look in adjustments, we see it's now 6. So we'll make sure that that's cleared out. It has to recognize that it is a brand new row, okay? I'll double check that to make sure it's right before releasing it to you. As we continue on, so what do I want to do when I save this? First thing, again, I want to check to see if it's a new one or not, right? If it is a new one, right, we know it's new by it's going to have the row associated with that. Making sure that we do. Maybe I'll make sure that we clear it out. So when we clear it out, we need to make sure the ID is associated with that, right? Very important. So we also need to know the row. So again, we're going to use the adjustment ID adding 2. right? So now we have 6, okay? I'll continue to test that to make sure if I want to navigate to previously when I decide, let's say I decide, no, this was not correct. It wasn't a 2. I may want to update that so we can do that. So let's go inside this macro, save, and take a look at that. So I'll double check through the code. First of all, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we have at least one inventory adjustment before saving, right? I want to make sure, I want to count if there's nothing here, right? If I do new here and I try to save this adjustment, right? We haven't made any changes, right? So we can't save it. It says, please make at least one adjustment before saving. So I want to know, are there any changes in this, right? So any changes. So we can do that with application worksheet function. We're going to count A using count A, all the way from column L7 to L99. If it's less than 1, that means they haven't made everything is blank and they haven't made any changes. Then we're going to give them this notice. Okay, so now if B4 equals empty, I want to double check this here. B4 equals empty, adjustment row, that's correct. It's going to be empty as long as the ID is empty. Then we know it is a brand new one, right? So then it's a new adjustment. So then we're going to set that adjustment item row based on the first row of the adjustments right here. We want to make sure that we have the first available row inside the adjustments. And then also what I want to do is I want to set B3. I want to set that brand new ID to whatever's in B5. B5 is going to hold our next ID, and I'm going to place that directly inside B3. And I also want to take that brand new row and I want to put that in the adjustment item row. I want to put that inside the database right here. And it's going to be changed. Actually, I'm going to change this to B3. This is our problem right here. As soon as we add that, I want to add that B3. B3 is going to take on that. But as soon as we add that in, B5 is going to recalculate. So I want to make sure B3 will take on. We've just added our brand new ID to B3. Our new adjustment's not going to be through. That should help. Also, the adjustment item row, if it's an existing one, right? If we've already saved that adjustment, that row is going to be located in B4. If B4 is empty, it's new. If B4 is not, we can pull it and extract it. So now we have an adjustment item row, irregardless of whether it is new. And now everything else, just the 2 items, adding the current date and adding the total amount is going to be regardless if it is a new or updating. Now what we need to do is go into the items, right? So I want to loop through all of these items here. And if there's been any change to the quantity, then I want to add or update the item. How do I know if it's previously created? Well, we can look here to B and see it's been previously created, so we just need to update row 17 or update row 16. However, if it is a new adjustment, we want to double check that we know this is blank, so we'll add a brand new row, and a brand new row would start down here in row 18. So let's take a look inside the code. So we're going to determine the last row based on column D. We're going to loop through all the rows. I want to see if there's any change to L, we know that the quantity has been adjusted. Right? Then we can continue on. But I also want to know if it's been previously saved. B is going to tell us that. If B is empty, we know it is a new adjustment. Otherwise, it's an existing adjustment, and we're going to pull that into a variable there. If it's a new one, what we're going to do is we're going to take that first available row inside the items, and we're going to assign that adjustment ID, whatever's in B3, we're going to place in A. I also want to set the row in column F, right? So I want to do 2 things, right? A is going to take on that adjustment ID. F is going to take on the row. Everything else is regardless of whether it's new or existing. So that's what we're going to do here. B is going to take on the current date. C is going to take on the name, the item name coming from D. And D is going to take on, I want to know the change, right? If I want to know, how do I know? So D is going to be on the change. So let's take a look. D is simply L minus I, right? I want to know the adjusted quantity. What is the adjustment quantity, right? Let's take a look here. How many have we adjusted, right? The actual quantity, right? If the actual quantity is 2, I've made an adjustment of -2, right? I want to know that subtract 2, right? So 2L minus I minus 4 is a -2. Our adjusted is -2. Remember I said in that formula we need to add in those adjustments. Remember I said if we're adding in those adjustments and that adjustment item is a negative, then it's going to reduce our amount. So we want, in this case, this is the differentiate. I want to know how many were adjusted. That number is going to be -2. It is that negative number that I want to save directly inside here, just like here, -2. I want to save it in negative so that I know how much to reduce our other inventory by, right? If I've noticed I've purchased 10 and I've sold 6, that's going to leave us with 4. But if I go to the warehouse and I only find 3 there, I need to adjust our quantity down. So I need a -1 to adjust it down to the correct. So our adjustment's going to have to be -1. Okay, so that's why, right? So if I go to the warehouse and we're supposed to have 4 in there and I only see 3, I need to make that adjustment of -1. So when I save that adjustment, I need to make sure that we have that -1 adjustment. So I know the graphics card if we add it to all the others, it's going to subtract it by 1. That's why that adjusted quantity is so critical. So that's just what we do inside the code here, right? So we're subtracting the total that we have minus the total that we say we have is our adjusted quantity. And I also want to set the location. I want to know what location that was adjusted in, right? And that if it's not equal to all locations, right? In case we're doing all locations, then it doesn't matter. But if we do have a specific location, I also want to place that adjustment. I want to know what location that was adjusted in. I want to place that location right here. That way, we only take -1 from a specific location, not all locations, right? We're only counting it on a per location basis. Okay, very good. So we've gone over that. That's it. And then all we're going to do is just run that fade out message, which is here. We've been over that a few times. No need to go over that. Okay, but what about when I want to load? Now, keep in mind that we're going to load an adjustment, right? If I've previously saved an adjustment and I want to go previous, I want to load whatever's been saved, right? So what do I want to do? I want to determine what the ID is, and I want to run an advanced filter. I want to load in, of course, the date and the amount. The amount is probably not important. The date, because the amount's calculated actually, so we don't want to load that in. And I want to load in all the items that are associated with it. So what I want to do is I want to run a criteria based on 6, and I want to know all the associated items, right? And I also want to know the item information. So I want to have those items come down here. And then I want to calculate some information based on what's the item. I want to know the part number, the category number. I want to know the sales description, the cost, and how many are currently in stock. Okay, and this formula is exactly the same as we've been over before, right? It's exactly the same as the same one previous. Okay, so I want to know how many are in stock. And then I also want to know the adjusted quantity and the row. Now, the adjusted quantity comes from here. How many did we adjust originally, and what is the row? So I want to bring all of that in. So we can do that through this line of code, right? First of all, we want to make sure that B4 is empty. We want to make sure to navigate to a correct adjustment, right? We cannot load an adjustment unless we have a specific row that's been associated, and that's located in B4. We need to have that. If it is correct load, then all we want to do is clear out all the existing data, clear out all the item pictures. So that's it. That's all we have to do. Then what we're going to do is focus on the inventory item names. I want to clear out any prior data on our database. So we're focused on this database. I'm going to clear out all the way from J4 and all the way down to Q. Clearing all that data out. Remember, clearing out. So we're going to run a brand new advanced filter using the last row. And our criteria is going to be H2 through A3. I'm only focused on this specific adjustment ID. I want those results to come in here. All I want the results to come in here and here and here. Now again, let's take a look at this. We have our headers have blank. That means when I run that advanced filter, I'm going to need to include G because our results have blank, right? Where our formulas are, right? So I want to bring in that because I want to bring it in a very specific order. It helps for VBA. So to do that, we need to make sure that our original data includes that blank column. Therefore, inside our original data, our advanced filter, column G, H3, and we want the results to come from J3 all the way to Q3, right? This will provide nothing, right? There's no data here until we use the formulas to bring it down. So it's going to bring in the item name, the item quantity, and the row. So it's going to all come there. Once I have that, I'm going to determine the last row. Then I'm going to take this formula and bring it down just those last rows. So we can do that with the following lines of code. The last row, of course, going to get here from column J. If it's less than 4, we're going to exit. This should be less than 3, right? No, 4. Sorry, it does start on 4 here. I'm going to make sure. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy down those formulas just like we did before. That's going to bring in all the details. Okay, so now once I have all the information, I can bring it in, right? So I can bring in that image. So inside, so now that I've got all the data, I'm going to bring all the way in from J all the way inside here, all the way through. So I'm going to bring it all the way from J through O, right? I'm going to bring it all the way in here. This information here. It's going to come directly inside here. So I'm going to bring it all the way to the quantity in stock. And then that's it. So continuing on. So once I have that, also in J through M, we're going to bring down those formulas just as we did before, bringing down the formulas. Then what I want to do is I want to do the actual quantity. The actual quantity, I'm going to bring in the actual quantity that was changed, going to come in P, right? So I want to know what was the change. Actually, sorry, it's going to be the adjusted quantity. Let me just update that. Adjusted. I did make a just quick adjustment. Adjusted quantity. I want to know, what was the adjusted quantity? What was the change? And that's going to come in there because we're saving the adjusted quantity, right? I want to make sure that we're saving. This is the adjusted quantity. I want to know how many were adjusted, right, on that time. That's very, very important. So I want to make also that change here. So I just made a quick change because I want to know the adjusted quantity. This is the adjusted quantity. How many did we make that adjustment on? Okay. So what it is out of the formula here. If it is a brand new adjustment, I want to show the actual quantity, right? What is the actual quantity? However, if it's an existing one, I want to show the adjusted quantity. We've adjusted quantity. So I put a little bit of a formula in here. If B4 is empty, meaning it is a brand new order, brand new, it hasn't been saved, we're going to show the actual quantity. Otherwise, I want to show the adjusted quantity, right? So we're going to just change the label there. That's going to make it a lot easier. So now we can see we've adjusted this. We know how many we've adjusted, okay? Much better. Okay, so we've got the adjustment quantity. And so let's go in here. So we've got the adjustment quantity. I also want to know the row that's associated. That row is going to go directly inside B, so we know what row is associated. Okay, very good. That's it. So now all we need to do, that's how we load the previous adjustments. But what I want to do is I want to be able to navigate, right? I want to use previous as I navigate before, and I want to see the navigate, and I want to go next, right, to the next. So if we take a look inside this, we can see that our adjustment ID is also moving, right? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we're going previous. We're simply navigating less until we get to 1, and then it's the stop. But when we do get to 1 on the previous, we want to let the user know that we're already at the first adjustment created. So let's take a look inside that macro. The adjusted ID is going to be based on what is located in B3. If the adjustment ID is 0, then there's no current ID. Let's say we have a new, that's 0 in this case, right? When I click previous, what do I want to happen? Well, in that case, I want it to go to the last one created, which is 7, right? So when I do that and I go previous, I want to make sure that 7 loads up. So that's what's going to happen here. If, let's say, if the adjustment ID equals 0, then there's no current ID, right? I want to make sure that we actually have at least 1 to load. What if we haven't saved any at all? If B5 equals 1, B5 would equal 1. Why would it? Because the next ID, there's no data at all, right? This is going to be 1. So if B5, that means there's no data at all, no saved adjustments. Let the user know, please save any adjustments before navigating to previously saved. Okay, great. So what if we do have one? If we do have one, I want to go to the next one. B3 is simply equal to B5, the maximum, minus 1. Set adjustment to the last one created, right? I know the maximum right here is 9, right? So if I go, I know the maximum here is 8. So I know the first one available is going to be 7, right? So the maximum. So we're just going to use B5 for that. B5 is the next ID, and we're going to take that. So B5, subtract 1, that's going to get us our last one created. Then we're going to run the macro that you just saw above. Okay, great. So what if it is 1? What if it's on the first one? Remember, I showed you if it's on the first one here, we need to let the user know that you've already at the first adjustment. So if it's 1, then we're simply going to let the user know with a message box you're already at the first one created and exit the sub. Otherwise, all we need to do is take whatever's in B3, subtract it by 1, and then run the macro. Okay, very good. Next is very similar, except I want a little bit of a warning. If we're on the last one, right, the created, you were on the last adjustment created. We're on 7, can't go any more. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, if we do a new adjustment, right, there's nothing, and we go next, right, I want to go to the first one, right? So here's again, new adjustment, there's nothing loaded, and I want to go next. Let's start it out with the first one. So we'll do that. So if adjustment ID 0 means there's no current ID, we're on a new section. What I want to do is if B5 equals 1, again, let them know there's no save. We can't navigate if we have not created a single adjustment. If we have, then all we're going to be doing is set the adjustment ID to the last one created. B3 equals B3, which is 0 at this point if it's new, plus 1, which is 1. So that's going to load that whatever is the next one there. If the adjustment ID is -1, if it's the last one, what if we're on the last one? What if we're on 7 or 8, right? Then you are already at the last adjustment created and exit the sub. Otherwise, simply, again, increase, this time before we reduce, increase B3, that adjustment ID by 1. Okay, very good. So last one, that's all we have to do for the navigation. Last one is the print. All we're going to be doing is setting that row dynamically. We're going to print it very easily, just like we did. So let's go over just a few lines of code. First of all, I want to make sure that we have information. I'm going to get the last row based on column D. If that last row is less than 7, please make sure to add the add-ins before printing a worksheet. Exit the sub. We're going to set that page setup. It's going to be based on D5 through M in the last row. We're going to make sure it is landscape. And then we're just going to print it. We're going to make sure to honor those print margins. And we're going to print settings. Okay, so that is it. That's all we have to do to print. That's everything we need to know for the inventory management. All right, very cool. We're making progress here. Very good. The last one is our dashboard. We got a really cool dashboard here. I can't wait to show it to you. Dashboard is going to be based on 2 different information. Are going to be based both on our order list. Let's go ahead and move that back to where we want it because I'm going to focus on the dashboard now. So I'm going to take these order items. I'm going to bring it all the way down here. And then I'm also going to take it our pivot data, which is here, and bring it up. That's perfect. So I've got our data set here. I've got our dashboard here. Let's bring our dashboard over here. Bring all the sheets there because I want to focus on these in scope. So we've got that information here. And lastly, I want to bring our pivot tables. I've got a brand new one for pivot tables. I'm going to bring that into the action. Let's take a look and look at your pivot data. Okay, I like that our pivot data is going to come from two different sets of data. We have one that's going to be our orders list. We've already seen this. Okay, I've got a named range here called orders, right? That is a table that I've set up. I'm actually using tables, although I almost never use tables. It's about time I started using a few of them because I want to make sure to put in some slicers and things like that. So, and also, what about our second table? It's going to be based on our order items, right? So we have order items, and I've also got a table set up for this. So if we take a look at the table here, we see that we've got a table called order items table. Order items table. That is a table set up, and I've created several pivot tables, right? So if we want to just insert a pivot table, all we need to do is pivot charts or pivot tables, and I've done that too, and I've done that 4 different times, and I've got 2 here. Inside our pivot table, we take a look at that. And we've got our order type here. So I've got one here, pivot tables. It's going to be based on the order types, right? So we've got pivot table fields. Now what I want to do in this one is I want to create different pivot charts based on the information here. So I want to know what are our top products sold. I really want to know that and how many were sold, right? How many were sold. So I want to know, we're going to set up some filters here, right? I want to know the amount. We're going to sum. I want to know the total amount. And I want to know the from or to type. Got some filters set up. I only want to know which ones are sold, right? I'm only focused on selling. How do we know when something's been sold? We know it's been dispatched, so we're going to set that filter only to dispatch. We also know it must be sent to a customer, so I don't want to know if it's anything from a supplier. I only want to know those orders been, so we're going to filter only those that dispatch and only when it's sent to a customer. Then what I want to do is I want to total all of the items, right? I want to have all of those items, the rows being the item names, knowing those items. And what I want to do is I want to bring that into the dashboard, right? So that's exactly what I have here in this pivot chart field. It's based directly on that data in chart 1, right? That data is directly related. So it's basically based on this. So we have it here. I'm just going to create this chart here. Very, very simple, just bar chart here. And I've just created the fonts and created everything relatively simple. It's nothing too direct. This is just a sample. You can use different formats. I just used one of the basic ones. And I like place this picture, just used a picture here and kind of fade it out to give it a look. And I put it on this basic, this shape here. I just put this shape here and put them on. That's pretty much it for the top item sales, giving you a name. So I know which items are top. And I've sorted by item so that the top one shows first. That is it for our list. Okay, but I also want to know what are the top sales by location, right? Which locations are the best ones, right? If I want to show just the warehouse, so I've got a slicer. If maybe I only want to show 2 of them, right? 2 different locations. I can hold down the control and select different ones if I want to see that. So how do I know which one? So I don't think we have any data. So how do I know which ones? Well, we're going to create this really cool pivot chart field here. And we've got this little total point, this donut graph here, that's going to let us know just that. And of course, we always have the conditions here. So back into our pivot data, if we take a look at this, we're going to look at some of that pivot data. We want to know the warehouse, right? I want to know based on the order type. I only want to know which order, again, also dispatched and customers. I really want to focus on which ones are coming from. Where are they coming from? Coming from which warehouses? Which are our top 5 locations selling to customers, right? I want to know that. And I want to sum the total amount so I know which warehouses are performing the best. So we can do that here. So we're doing that based on there. And I also want to know the from location. That's what I want to know, from locations. Dispatch to the customers. That's what we want to focus on. Only those 2 areas. And that is the chart that I've created here inside the dashboard here. So, and I've created a little bit of a slicer for that here. So we know our top performing sales by location. How do we know if it's a sale? We know it's been dispatched and we know it's a customer. And we've created this little slicer here. Simply inserting a slicer here will let us do that. And that's all we've done here. Okay, great. So we know how to do that and we know how to get them. And we've got another one. What about I want to know top drivers? Now, if I want to know the top drivers by date, I want to know all of the drivers by date. So how are we going to know that? Well, that's going to come from a different one. Let's take a look inside our pivot data here. And we're going to scroll over here. And now what I want to know is I want to know all the orders, right? Taking a look at all the orders, and I want to know all the orders by date, right? So I want to know everything, and I want to know all of our data. Maybe I want to have just specific dates, or I want to know how many to have. So our filters are going to be based on our dates. So we've created a little bit of a slicer based on that. So I want to know, maybe I want to know only March, right? Or only April, or maybe only May, right? There's not much data, I don't have much data here, but I want to know which drivers in a specific area. So again, we can use this really fantastic timeline feature, right? If we want to know a timeline feature, all we need to do, of course, inside our pivot data, and just here inside pivot table analyzer, and we can just insert a timeline and just go here, insert timeline, and that's going to insert a time. So it's going to be based on order date, and click OK, and that's going to be our timeline. And then that's all we have to do. Again, just do this. It's going to automatically filter that data based on that timeline. So we can move it out, right? Our data is going to automatically adjust based on that. Okay, so we can also get rid of some of this. Maybe we don't want to show all of that information. We only show some of it. Clearing the order date, we can clear out the filters very easily. And we want to, maybe we can remove it. And then what I want to do is maybe we want to customize it. And so now we can see inside our timeline here, right here, our custom feature here, we can customize it automatically. Now, I don't know why we'd want green, but right, so we can modify these timelines. So I just chose no background, and then also creating your custom. That way you can set an auto, you can add it to gallery access, or you can modify it. So we can just set it up. So I did the same thing with my timeline formatting error. And of course you can use no color because I didn't like the no color. Clicking OK, there we go. So now you see there's no color, and it is this one. So I just copied this, and then we're going to paste it, or we can of course move it over here if we want to move it over. So that's it for the timeline. Very simple on that. And lastly, what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you how we were able to create what I wanted was our top customers, right? If we take a look inside the dashboard, I want to know our top customers by a specific period, right? And this way we have quarters. So this timeline we're showing quarters. So if I go back into our pivot, I also want to know the top customers. Again, we're focused again on here. Our values are count received location, right? I want to know inside here, what is that count, right? Our received location is the customer, right? So we know it's dispatched. We know it's customer, right? So we're dispatching it. So our received location is based on that. I want to know the received location, which is our customers, and I want to count them. I want to know how many what are our top customers in a certain area. And then I want to create a timeline for this too, right? I want to know which time. So if I do pivot table and I decide I'm going to insert a timeline here, I'm going to base it on, of course, order date because I want to know them, but I want to know a specific, I want to know by quarter. So if I click that and I want to click by quarter, so I've clicked quarters here. So now we can see, we can determine by what quarter, which customers have the highest number of sales on a per quarter basis, all right? And of course, I just added some pictures and some looks to that. It's not the biggest dashboard, but a basic one, and it covers our purposes here for this. You can really expand on this. There's so much you can do with that. Wow, what an incredible training. In this training, I showed you how to automatically receive orders on a per supplier and then distribute them multiple warehouses, also pick them up from multiple suppliers, deleting, showing pictures, also assigning a driver and truck and automatically. And we did the same thing for our dispatch orders. We can also send them to specific customers or send them to other warehouses, displaying pictures and drivers. And we can adjust those quantities on hand as we manage our inventory. We can then adjust them on a per warehouse basis, which is really powerful. We can also have a dynamic sort based on any type. So we got that. And of course, an incredible dashboard where we showed you how to create top item sales using pivot charts, slicers, and timelines. Thank you so much. If you like this training, don't forget to subscribe. Click the like button, and I hope we'll see you next week. And of course, if you want to support us, Patreon's a great way to do that. I've got downloadable PDFs, got early bird videos, downloadable video content. We have, of course, the feature, fix, or focus, where if you want a customization of this, next week I'm going to be customizing this, and it's going to be directly based on your recommendations. So get your recommendations in now, and I can't wait to customize this for you. All right, thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.